What up, what up, what up, what up? It is Wednesday, October 27th, 2021. And ever since I started streaming Final Fantasy VI Brave New World, I've been having a lot of discussions with a couple of the developers. A lot of times I'll ask them questions about this, that, and the other. And the most prevalent answer, not saying that it's a bad thing, is to read the print me, which came with the patch. And so that's what I'm fixing to do today, which is also going to lead into a scheduled live stream at 8. It's going to be a short one, 8 to 10 my time, because I have a delicious dinner waiting for me at that time. So I wanted to jump in here, and we're just chatting today. It's not even a live stream playthrough. It will literally be me reading through the print me that was also put in here. So if you could be patient with me, we're going to start at the very beginning. I may gloss over some of the, I'm not going to say boring parts, but I'm going to stick with the most prevalent stuff that I want to talk about. But first I want to make sure that everything is looking good and sounding good on your people's end. I know we don't have anybody in here yet, but if you can just sound off in the chat letting me know if the mic sounds good, if the bedrock in the back sounds good, if it's not overtaking anything else, I would really appreciate that. I'm in here in the chat right now. Just want to make sure everything looks good from here. And let's get started. So, Final Fantasy VI, Brave New World, Read Me. Table of contents. 1, a personal message from BTB. Someone who comes through and says hi every stream, literally every stream that I've done so far. He's really been a big part of all of my streams so far. He always stops by and says hi. I always appreciate him. And I lost my camera feed, so be patient. And it looks like we're good on my end. I'm just waiting for it to pop up on... There we go. All right, and we're here. So, we'll start from a message from BTB. He's been hanging out in the chat. They've been hanging out in the chat with me every stream that I've done, literally for hours on end. Got me linked up with a whole bunch of other people in the community, and I've overall had a really good, positive experience with them. So we'll start from the beginning. One day back in 2011, a co-worker of mine showed me a Final Fantasy VI ROM editor that he found on the worldwide pornography receptacle known as the Internet. True. We got to talking about how the editor could be used to fix bugs and other issues in the game. Like how some a-hole left the caps lock on when he was naming everybody. Facts. This soon led to a discussion about how cool it would be if you can restrict certain espers to certain characters. Beyond which the story differs depending on which one of us you ask, since neither one of us wants to assume credit for instigating this mess. What we can agree on, however, is that the resulting product is something that we're very proud of. What is Brave New World? This is the question that I found myself often at odds to distinctly answer over the last 8 years. In short, it's the mechanics and ideas set forth by the original game fully realized with the assistance of over 25 years worth of additional technology and design theory. Not to mention that, as a fan project, Brave New World is not bound by corporate deadlines, and thus has been in active development for nearly a decade. What began as a pet project between co-workers that has blossomed into a massive community undertaking larger than either of us could have possibly dreamed. Final Fantasy VI presented an unusually large cast for its time, 12 characters, plus 2 hidden ones, alongside a veritable slew of abilities to use with them. But lurking just beneath the surface of this illusion of choice was the harsh reality of homogeny. There was little to individualize characters who had access to the exact same magic spells, which far outstripped their unique skills in terms of usefulness, and whose statistical diversity was rendered largely moot by the fact that only one of the 4 core attributes was even remotely functional. Although the game would often present a variety of options at any point, Gal's list of 255 rages, for example, these options would generally consist of almost entirely of bad/useless ones, with a select few ranging from being overpowered to flat out broken. Often, entire mechanics would be invalidated, such as Cyan's sword tech skill, not considering the power of his sword, so that the legendary blade which split the heavens in twain ultimately had the exact same effect in battle as the crap he starts out with, which he probably bought on Home Shopping Network. I like the flourish here. A lot of personality coming through here. And distinctly sounds like BTB. Oh, we're staying hydrated for this, by the way. There's going to be a lot of talking on here. Pardon me. Thank you for being patient. Several are unavoidable due to various bugs, which the original game was full of. Brave New World seeks to offer meaningful choices to players by means of unique spell sets and multiple growth options for each character, and a challenge sufficient to warrant that investment. But unlike what might immediately come to mind when the average person thinks of a difficulty hack, the goal here is simply to provide a well-balanced game that acts as a vehicle for players to use the skills that their characters will acquire rather than punishing and then mocking them for taking the most logical course of action. Similarly, it seeks to avoid the, quote, one road to victory approach of offering several inferior choices alongside the one intended option that anyone interested in finishing the game should choose. But far and away, the absolute best thing about Brave New World is the amazing community that has come to surround it. I owe so many relationships with so many wonderful people to this hack that I can say with no conceit that it's the best thing I've ever done. To everyone that has ever played or live streamed or even just told anyone about Brave New World, you have my heartfelt gratitude. Brave New World is what it is today because of you, and for those about to play, we salute you. BTB, May 2019. Yikes. Almost 2 years ago. Installation. We're not going to worry about this. Characters and game balance. The discussion of a subject as broad as overall game balance should probably start at the same place we did in development, which is at the characters themselves. Final Fantasy VI had a fairly unique system wherein pretty much the entirety of the character development was tied to Espers, which carried a few rather obvious downsides. The first is that due to bad coding / poor life choices, only one stat, magic, was at was at all worth raising in the first place. This led to a lot of munchkining, despite nothing at all resembling enough difficulty to warrant it. Especially considering that because any character could use any Esper, the end game invariably devolved into an Ultima spam fest, which would be the other downside. Thus, two major sets of changes were made to the code. One, we had to change how the game handles every other stat so that magic isn't the only one with any value whatsoever. Two, we had to take care of that pesky everyone can equip every Esper problem. This allowed me to mold each character into a special flower with unique spell lists and growth options. For further details on the various hacks that we make Brave New World different from vanilla, skip ahead to section 4. Otherwise, what follows is a quick, not really, rundown of each character in the game and the roles that they now fill. I can't wait. I love this stuff. I hope you find this interesting too. So I'm noticing on the stream that my face is completely blown out because I'm literally looking at this giant screen. So hold. Alexa, turn on the office light. We're going to see how this does for us. Might make it worse, might make it better. We'll find out. But in the meantime, Terra and Celeste, major stats, all but speed. Terra / all Celeste, magic types, all types. Terra and Celeste are discussed together because they both still function very similarly to one another. They are essentially red mages on steroids. Jills of all trades who can easily adapt to any team you put them in and who can excel in any role that they're set up for. Both lack a directly offensive special skill, and so their usefulness is largely dependent on their spells and equipment. Lucky for them, they have access to most of the game's best equipment along with more Espers, and thus more spells, than the rest of the cast. Terra's main advantage are a superior spell selection and a skill that capitalizes on her beatstick nature, while Celeste is more well-rounded with the better stats and support magic. Runic and Morph have both been through some significant mechanical changes as well. The former has been standardized to work with all white, gray, and black magic, any spell that starts with a colored dot, but not on any blue magic, any attack that doesn't. This, along with the fact that many more enemies use such spells in general, is meant to make using the skill both more intuitive to use and worth your while to do so. A few assembly hacks, discussed in Section 4, also fixes some bugs it had so that it feels a lot more like a proper ability instead of a broken mess. Regarding Morph, it's now a toggled stance rather than a timed one, and the first of several skills that aims to reduce stamina from the dump stat heap by allowing it to reduce the double damage that Terra now takes in her Esper form in return for the offensive boost that it provides. This makes using Morph a decision that hinges on more than just a simple matter of Terra being charged up for it. And those who are willing to suffer the drawbacks will find that a Morph Terra is easily Brave New World's most fearsome warrior and will likely be the first and possible only character to hit the damage cap. Links and links. Lock. Stand by. I'm just trying to make sure that the bedrock is not distracting. Back to business. Lock. Major stats. Vigor, speed, HP, MP. I need to write this stuff down. Magic types. Black, white. At first glance, Locke appears to be nothing more than an inferior version of Terra and Celeste. He lacks their raw magical power and their massive spell repertoires, instead focusing mainly on physical attacks. Instead of focusing mainly on physical attacks and healing magic, but what he lacks in their versatility, he picks back up in high speed and evasion. Neither stat featured very prominently in the original game, and Locke serves as a good example of just how significant these advantages are now. He tends towards armor of the lighter variety, and dual wielding is now baked into his weapon of choice rather than enabled by a relic. So his main defense is just not getting hit in the first place. Furthermore, his speed advantage will be felt both in his role as a healer as well as his ability to dish out physical damage much faster than other characters can. Locke's magical abilities are also aided by the fact that he is now one of the 3 characters to which the X magic ability is restricted. However, dual casting with Locke is something of a double-edged sword and an effective demonstration of how the more limited MP pools for the game's non-primary spellcasters relegates them to a more physical roles. That said, Locke is more than capable of outperforming the girls on the magical front, but it requires a focus on building and managing his MP in order to pull it off. Rounding out Locke's skill set is Steel, which was reworked to make a bit of sense. Only enemies who might be actually holding something, i.e. humans, can be stolen from on Brave New World. Trying to steal from a bear will just get you a very dead lock. The idea is that fewer and more obvious targets for theft along with better rewards for doing so will make the treasure hunting more attractive. The formula has been reworked to use lock speed for both the odds of success and of getting a new rare steal, which was previously set at 1 in an 8th chance. While a successful theft will now immediately refills Locke's ATB meter so that attempts can be chained together. This not only makes it easier to rob the entire enemy parties, but also upgrades Mug to a tactical multi-strike against human mobs. Very nice. Stand by. I'm still tweaking some things on the back end. Let's see here. Okay, let's... All right, sorry about that. I keep trying to tweak these things. And I have my boy Lokar helping me out, making sure that everything looks good on his end. With more practice, I'm sure I'll be able to nail this, but for right now, this is what we got, so please be patient. Thank you. Edgar. In stark contrast to the above, Edgar is a character whose usefulness is tied almost completely to his special skills. Although one of our overall goals was to make the regular physical attacks more competitive, Edgar remains the game's one character with a clearly preferable alternative to his chainsaw and or his drill. In the original game, Edgar peaked early due to his tools being very overpowered initially. But they failed to scale well and left him with little else to do in the endgame besides dragooning. We thus overhauled his tools and their effects in an attempt to keep the skill relevant in the late game, as well as to reduce the gross amount of redundancy. Of note, his new tools, the Defibrillator and Mana Battery, which provide a degree of utility and allow for a viable magical support build. Of course, making Edgar a physical powerhouse is still very much an option, and his weapons have been reworked to ensure that they remain an important part of his loadout, even if they're only functioning as stat sticks. Swords provide a good basic stat boost, whereas the spears have been retooled into defensive weapons that boost max HP and allow him to protect his allies. Spears now also possess the hold with both hands for more damage property, i.e. the gauntlet effect, which can combine with the inherent bonus that spears already add to jump attacks for truly amazing damage. In part because of this, and in part of the whole unique flower thing, Dragooning is now exclusive to Edgar and Mog and Gogo. One advantage of particular note in going the Dragoon route is that jumping is not subject to the back row damage penalty, whereas Drill and Chainsaw, see section 4 below, now are. Ultimately, Edgar's most notable feature in pretty much any build is likely his ability to tank. He gets a lot of HP through both his equipment and Espers, and he likes his heavy armor. He also gets more than one long-range physical attack. That auto crossbow may end up more useful in late game than you may think. So camping in the back row is always an option for the king. He gets several healing and support spells to assist him in his role, but he must rely exclusively on his other skills for damage output. Sabin. Stand by. Sabin. All right, I'm not crazy. I think I'm getting it now. All right, thank you for being patient with me. I appreciate you guys. Sabin! Sabin's my boy! I love him. I have no problem saying that. Sabin. Major stats, vigor, stamina, HP, magic types, gray, black. Sabin has been through quite a lot of changes in Brave New World in order to make him fit his character archetype. Whereas his brother is basically Kain from Final Fantasy IV with tools and a permanent hard-on, Sabin now more closely resembles Yang. The mere presence of Blitz originally relegated his regular attacks to the rubbish bin, and his claws didn't even make for decent stat sticks since the best Blitzes all did magic damage. Taking a cue from Yang, the new name of Sabin's game is a lot of punchy elemental damage with a lot of added effects. His claws now all deal elemental damage and have random spellcasts attached. He is then forced to dual wield them in true monk style by no longer being able to equip shields. He makes up for this, as well as his inability to wear too much other armor, with some truly impressive base stats. That's why I love him. That's why he's my boy. Alexa, turn off the office light. Alexa, turn off the office light. All right. Blitzes have also been reworked, just as tools were, in an attempt to keep them useful throughout the game. The result is a varied skill set that provides a choice as to how to develop Sabin's stats. A Vigor Sabin, for example, will focus more on physical blitzes like Pummel and Suplex, both of which continue his added effects theme by setting Sap and Stop respectively. Great stats. I love me some Sap. I love me some Stop. The former remains relevant since Sap is a significant presence in boss fights, while the latter remains useful to disable random enemies. On the other hand, several blitzes are now affected by Sabin's stamina, making him one of the best users of this once useless stat. A stamina-based Sabin is a more defensive Sabin who assists his allies with mantra, and its new counterpart, Chakra. That restores the team's MP instead of their HP while relying on their now stamina-based Aura Bolt and Sonic Boom. formerly Airblade, for the bulk of his damage. Early in the game, Sabin's natural stats will make him one of the most powerful and beefiest characters available. Later on, his limited armor options will become more of an issue, and he'll have to rely more on his high HP to stay on his feet. One advantage that Sabin has in this regard is that his high vigor and stamina will help him take much more consistent damage from enemy attacks due to how they function now as a sort of natural defense. See Section 4 below for details. I can't wait for Section 4. They keep hyping it like this. But he still ends up eating a lot more of it in the long run than characters who can actually wear armor. Cyan. The Undead's mortal enemy, Cyan. Major stats, Vigor, Stamina, HP, Magic types. White, Black. Cyan suffered immensely in the original game for being the most physically oriented fighter in a world where magical damage reigned supreme, and the crummy balance decisions made 7/8 of his special attacks not worth the lifetime it took to use them. He gets a much-needed overhaul in Brave New World in the form of both a new global physical damage formula that renders his style of combat no longer complete garbage, as well as some special attention to his special skills in the same vein as Tools and Blitz before them. From the undead vanquishing powers of Mind Blow, the dies if MP0 flag is now used exclusively on all undead foes, to the supreme destruction of Tempest, aka Quadra Slice. Yes. Every Bushido has a purpose to fill and a chance to shine. Also, the Bushido meter no longer takes an entire lifetime to charge, and the strength of his sword actually factors into the strength of his sword skills. What a novel concept. Like Sabin, Cyan is now denied the use of shields in order to force the inherent can be held with both hands for extra damage bonus on all of his weapons, which helps to make even his regular physical blows a mighty force to be reckoned with. DPS, DPS, DPS. Also, like Sabin, Bushido techniques that do physical damage will only be half as strong to those without a brave warrior spirit who cower in the back row. But even with these drawbacks, Cyan's heavy armor and earlier access to Empower ensures that he's just as good as taking damage as he is dishing it out. Furthermore, the overall lack of diversity in his Esper bonuses more or less guarantees that he'll end up with more vigor and or HP than just about anyone else. Build-wise, Cyan could really only has two options. You can either pump his vigor to solidify him as the resident king of physical damage, or make him an impenetrable brick wall. Like Edgar, he has several healing spells so that he can bring his allies back from the brink whenever he finds himself the last man standing, and the fact that Empower also absorbs MP, which makes him a good out-of-battle patch-up guy to boot. Shadow, my boy, stand by. I'm trying to make sure that this sounds right. Sounds good so far, but I'm still missing something. Got it. I think I got it now. Got a lot of stuff going on here. Shadow, major stats, vigor, speed, magic type, gray, white. It's fair. Being a ninja, Shadow naturally winds up in the role of fragile speedster in this mod patch. He doesn't use shields because ninjas have no interest in defending themselves when they can instead be dual-wielding totally sweet ninja weapons. And the armor that he wears is of the don't get hit in the first place variety. I can rock with that. Shadow thus tends to die whenever he gets hit, but he almost never does. He does nearly end up with the same problem as Edgar, where his special skill completely outclasses his regular attacks, thus regulating him to permanent back row status. But the high price of throwables along with the options for X-Fight later in the game are sufficient to lure him out to the front lines. I love that. Regarding throw, it's now restricted exclusively to knives, scrolls, and stars. No more chucking swords or rods. Each type of throwable now functions more uniquely than before. Knives tend to do the most damage, but are more expensive and only single target, whereas throwing stars can now be spread like a spell to hit a group of enemies. Scrolls, as always, do elemental damage that can be extremely powerful against a single target, since the damage is forcibly split against multiple targets. Finally, Shadow can now set the image status, also known as blink, on his teammates rather than just on himself with smoke bombs, known in the original game as Shadow Edges, which along with his handful of healing and support spells makes him an excellent utility character to have on hand. Shadow's greatest asset by far, however, is his unmatched speed. Pound for pound, Shadow has the highest DPS potential of any character in the game, due mostly to just how fast he can attack. This is why he's balanced by being made of tissue paper. Add this to the above-mentioned support capabilities, and you get an incredible addition to any team, provided you can figure out how to keep him alive. Risk and reward. Love it. I rocks with it. Gao. Major stats. Stamina, speed, magic types, gray, white. Gao, my boy. Minute. Let me just take a minute to shower some praise on my boy Gao. Came up from nothing, started from the bottom, now we here. He's top tier. I rocks with him heavy. So, Gao has always been a love him or hate him sort of guy, and at least that much hasn't changed here. What I tried to do is make it harder to hate loving him by overhauling his rage list in the same spirit as the other special skills, thus rendering the 64 remaining rages, down from nearly 4 times that amount in the original game, at least as desirable as the select few that were in any way useful before, not to mention a great deal more diverse. The mechanics of leaping in the Veld itself has also been fixed so that those inclined to use him no longer need to invest a lifetime into building him up. Without going into too much detail, enemies without rages, not to be confused with men without hats, nice, no longer appear on the Veld, and you don't actually have to be on the Veld to learn new rages. Great. Quality of life. Stat-wise, Gao ends up drinking from the same punch bowl as Shadow. He dies in a gentle breeze, he likes to evade damage instead of taking it, and he's one speedy little shit. Much like Shadow, excuse me, perhaps even more so, Gao ends up ludicrously fast by the end of the game, largely due to a lack of any other stats to raise. Combined with the fact that his only means of attack requires no user input beyond the initial selection, Gao can easily be Brave New World's fastest character. In the end, though, Gao is still the same as he's always been. Useful, bordering on broken if used well, but very difficult to use well. As the majority of his effectiveness stems directly from proper, clever use of his rages, the info found in the print me should prove especially helpful to Gao fans. Otherwise, he's designed so that even if you only grab a handful of rages, those few are at least still useful. Setzer. My boy, Setzer. Major stats. Magic, stamina, HP, MP. Magic types. White, black. Setzer, perhaps most importantly, is one of the game's major healers. He also arguably the beefiest, with the potential to gain lots of HP and being mostly restricted to heavy armor. While his selection of healing spells is obviously important to this role, equally notable are his slots. Losing spins are now twice as powerful as they were in the original game, and act as sort of a poor man's version of Bandon's health command, thus making for a quite effective and spammable full party heal. How Setzer likes to heal will depend in part on where his stats are. Traditional cure magic scales with magic power, as does his slots. The remedy and regen spells, however, now restore HP in addition to their normal effects and instead scale in power with stamina. Both are more of use here due to a larger focus on status effects, particularly sap and regen. Brave New World also features a upgraded version of the regen spell, which will target multiple allies, and is of the bigger selling points of a stamina-based build. And Setzer is one of the few characters with access to it. On the offensive side of things, slots have been de-rigged to favor skill completely instead of RNG. And a magically built Setzer can be highly effective carpet bomber if he can reliably nail winning spins. I can't. I still haven't been able to. Physically, he has the option to dual wield, and is the exclusive user of the reworked X-Fight relic. And the fact that he is unable to raise his vigor through Espers means that his damage output is completely unaffected by build choice. And finally, there's GP Toss, a now a free targeting stamina-based attack and Setzer's best available source of consistent single target damage. Yeah, but I'm broke and I can't afford to throw money around like that. The primary constant across any Setzer build is a heavy focus on tanking damage. But unlike Edgar, who can counteract his choice of heavy armor with multiple speed boosting Espers, Setzer winds up as one of the slowest characters in the game, weak. But that's not really a problem for him, since he ultimately cares less about DPS than, say, Terra or Cyan, both of whom have similar issues with speed and more about staying alive and keeping his teammates the same way. Doesn't learn a traditional revival spell like Terra or Locke do, and he doesn't have the speed to play fast and loose like Realm Count. So his approach to healing has to be a lot more proactive and preventable as a result. That's not to say that this all doesn't leave any room for fighting, just that it tends to be, well, a roll of the dice. Nice. Mog! Just picked up Mog, actually, with some help at the last stream, so I appreciate you, Lokar. Major stats, all but MP. Magic types, black and gray. Mog is something of an oddball character in Brave New World. He gets a generous selection of Esper stat boosts and a great potential to maximize them since he is an entirely optional character. But he doesn't really hybridize well, thus leading to some very unusual and rather extreme build options. Interesting. Probably his most obvious choice is to focus on Mog's magic power, which boosts both the potency of his spells and of his offensive dance steps. With a smattering of offensive and status magic to choose from, access to the X-Magic ability, and the ability to equip rods, this whole hog into jacking up his magic power is far from a bad idea, which I've been doing. Note, however, that Dance also uses his stamina not only to determine the odds of stumbling on non-native terrain, but also to raise the effectiveness of the steps that heal the party. The 8 dances themselves have been rebalanced to be more uniquely tailored to the specific builds and situations, rather than just being the same thing 8 times over. Just with different backgrounds, Water Rondo, for example, is a heavily offensive dance that will be mostly appreciated by a magic-built Mog looking to deal big damage, which I am. Whereas the Forest Suite is a more defensive dance that can be utilized to great effect by the tankier build. Not my cup of tea, but good to know. Both examples are particularly useful in boss battles, whereas other dances like Love Sonata, and Disc Requiem are more suited to random crowd control. I nail the odd word and I stumble on the easy word. Such is life. On the flip side, Monk can also opt to forego all that magic crap and embrace his role as the mod's other potential Dragoon. While he may at first appear to be pretty much just Edgar, but cuter, he gains access to a few things that drastically set him apart from everybody's favorite perv. At least some of which is a weapon type other than spears that make for viable pogo sticks. Generally speaking, Mog most likely won't be doing much attacking aside from jumping, since his physical damage output is otherwise lacking. Ideally, whenever a physically built Mog isn't taking a hint from Van Halen, jump, I get it. He'll instead be taking advantage of his spells and dances that don't rely on his raw magic power to be effective. The conclusion is that while Mog has many skills and abilities available to him, no one build is really able to take full advantage of them all. Instead, it's better to focus on what you want out of him and work towards that goal. Failing that, he tends to be a subpar character with little purpose other than being the adorable team / corporate mascot and a rather blatant Arthur avatar. What do you mean, Mog? Next, I want to be more magic damage from my dances. Only the real ones know that. Alright, ignore me. I was just looking at the monitor to see if I can turn the brightness down, but not even worth it, bruh. Not even worth it. Back to business. Strago. I don't think I've gotten him yet, but I rocks with him in Dissidia Opera Omnia. He's one of my top tier characters. He dual casts everything. Quasar, his HP attack. I forget what the other one is. It's a triangle. Cast that twice. He's my boy. Major stats: magic, stamina, MP, magic types, black and gray. Strago is essentially Cyan's magical counterpart in Brave New World. He casts the spells that makes the peoples fall down. Simple, to the point. I like it. He boasts the highest natural and potential raw magic power in the game, as well as an ability which makes great use of it. Lore, as you can probably guess by now, has been given the same treatment as every other skill before it, wherein all of the useless garbage has been pruned out, and all that remains is now more useful. His regular spell selection is a bit less impressive, but he does get X magic to keep it competitive / interesting. As for his equipment, rods, Strago's weapon of choice, have been reworked as viable magic-based weapons. See MP4 crits in Section 4 for details. Section 4! We're building it up. We're heading to it. It's coming. All of this makes him more dependent on MP than any other character to be effective in battle, and he's thus one of the few who is able to significantly raise it, and one of only two to learn the Osmos spell. Strago's two main disadvantages are that he's squishy and he's slow AF. His natural stats and armor will provide him with good magical defense, but his physical defense and HP will remain low. His crummy speed can be overcome with enough of the right equipment, and his survivability can be upped by a decent margin with an all-out stamina build. But you really can't do both, and either one will tend to come at the expense of maximizing his magic power. Which direction you choose will hinge mostly on whether you prefer to use him primarily as a nuker, or to take advantage of his many utility spells / lures to support the rest of the team. In either case, he probably needs to stay in the back row, since the only advantage of not doing so is better spell damage from his rods, which can admittedly be worth it in some cases. Realm. I tend to say Realm. Major stats: magic, speed, stamina, MP, magic types, all types. I'll say Realm because I'm so used to it, but I know it's Realm. Realm? I'm going to say Realm. Screw it. Realm may seem like a pint-sized, foul-mouthed version of her grandfather at first, but she's actually a very different beast. Both are glass cannons with an emphasis on powerful magic, but their similarities end there. First off, she trades a bit of her grandfather's raw magic power to get back some much-needed speed. Second, Realm possesses a handful of the game's strongest spells, both as her main advantage and as her main weakness. Realm functions well as both an offensive powerhouse and as a traditional healer, but the downside is that she has little else going on for her otherwise. Her early game offense is largely limited to Sketch, which at least works now, and her primary healing ability outside of endgame magic is whacking her friends with a paintbrush. Definitely a late bloomer, this one. Because of Realm's strong emphasis, that is to say her outright dependence on powerful magics, she's the only other character who now learns Osmos, so that she, at the very least, remains self-sufficient. Just remember that if she's still quite squishy, so stick her in the rear, phrasing, and use her speed and offensive magic as a means to eliminate as much of the enemy threat as quickly as possible. Umaro and Gogo. These two, lastly, end up in Brave New World as largely enhanced versions of what I presume they were originally meant to be. Umaro is big, strong, and hits like a truck. Due to this, he'll appeal greatly to the inexperienced players that are just looking for a tank to smash stuff up. But because he can't really do anything else, his long-term usefulness is somewhat limited. Gogo, on the other hand, looks downright horrid on paper due to his crummy stats and generally lackluster equipment options. However, the mysterious pile of rags holds great rewards for the clever player who takes time to unlock his true potential. In the original game, Gogo's role was heavily diminished by the aforementioned fact that by the time you found him, your team was already full of faceless Ultima factories. But if we've at all succeeded in our goal to mold every character into a unique being, each with their own distinct advantages and disadvantages, then there is tremendous value in someone who can wield any of those advantages at will. In fact, if not for his abysmal stats, Gogo would be hands down the absolute best character in the game, even with him. He still very well may be. Patches and assembly hacks. Alright, so we cleared the characters. Very interesting. Glad to have a full understanding of where they wanted to go with these guys and girls. Now I'll be able to make more informed decisions as to what I would want to build these characters towards. We ain't done Section 4, the sought after and very much hyped Section 4. So let's go. Patches and assembly hacks. Esper restrictions. I will get this name right one day. Today will not be that day. Sorry, I'll get it eventually. This is pretty much the cornerstone of the entire patch. It restricts the use of Espers only to characters who are compatible with them. Refer to the print me for a full list. Thus allowing us to further individualize each character due to the fact that Espers are basically the only real contributing factor to character development in Final Fantasy VI. Special thanks to King Mike for help with optimizing this hack. Esper Bonuses. Aside from the above, and complementary to it, the most sweeping change made in Brave New World is transforming the Esper level up stat bonuses from an apparent last-minute afterthought in the game's design to the core of character development and customization. Pardon me. Espers now offer the following cumulative stat bonuses. HP plus 60, MP plus 40, HP plus 30 / MP plus 15, HP plus 30, stamina plus 1, MP plus 25 / stamina plus 1, Vigor plus 1, HP plus 20, Magic plus 1 / MP plus 15, Vigor plus 1 / Speed plus 1, Magic plus 1 / Speed plus 1, Vigor plus 1 / Stamina plus 1, Magic plus 1 / Stamina plus 1, Speed plus 1 / Stamina plus 1, Vigor plus 2, Magic plus 2, Stamina plus 2, Speed plus 2. Noticing a pattern here. Esper experience. We encountered several obstacles regarding Esper stat boosts, the least of which was that almost every stat sucked. See NATB system, physical damage, and stamina overhaul below. And the most persistent of which was that Final Fantasy VI leveling system was clearly not designed with Esper stat boosts in mind. This ultimately resulted in an environment where, after everything else was all said and done, players were penalized for not keeping levels as low as possible in the early game because every level gained without Espers was empty. Late game characters like Setzer and Strago were hit particularly hard by this, as was any character build which relied heavily on World of Ruin Espers. To balance this, stat boosts from Espers were given their own leveling system independent of regular levels. Each character starts out at a Esper level of 0, regardless of their regular level, and gains Esper points, experience for Esper levels, according to the following formula. Esper points equals spell points. Math. Note, spell points were renamed from magic points. Note that Esper levels use the same experience table as regular levels and cap at 25. Also note that a character will not gain any Esper points if he or she has no Esper equipped, which is no longer an issue because the newfound advent Esper Bank. The newfound advent of character builds eventually found itself at odds with the fact that they still had to equip Espers to learn spells, which meant a lot of battles on the veldt and or micromanagement of experience gains to avoid gaining unwanted Esper levels. To alleviate this concern, Esper points earned in battle will now go into a bank for each character, and spells are now learned by spending them in the Esper menu without needing to actually equip the Esper and fight with it on. Awesome. The learning rate for spells on Espers is now the cost of that spell. The maximum amount of spell points that any character can bank at a time is 30. Similarly, Esper levels are banked in the same manner as Esper points are, rather than being granted immediately upon earning them in battle. This completely eliminates the need to micromanage equipped Espers for purposes of stat gains. And it also allows for a respec feature later in the game that reverts all of your spent ELs to the bank so that you can rebuild characters with different stat boosts. Yes! Yes! Thank you, please. Thank you. Top tier. Another quality of life update that I didn't know that I needed. But reading through this and now reading Section 4, glad to have it. Yes. I marked out for that, so that's good. To spend a banked EL, just click on the EL bonus in the Esper menu. Familiar with that. Esper Junctions. Think DN, Psy Baby, and now Wave. Apologies for mispronunciations. The only problem with the Esper Bank system removing the need to micromanage Espers was exactly that. Players no longer had a reason to care who had what equipped, since the only functional difference between them at that point was summoning them in battle. To address this, Espers now provide a on-equip bonus, just like a piece of equipment, such as a stat boost or reducing incoming elemental damage, that is completely separate from the Esper's EL bonus. For example, Kieran offers a +5 bonus to magic when equipped, but raises HP and stamina for each EL spent. The former is a static bonus that's only present so long as Kieran remains equipped, whereas EL bonuses are permanent, cumulative, and not contingent on the Esper being equipped. Characters may also mix and match EL bonuses from their available Espers to their liking, whereas only one may be equipped at any given time. Levels and experience. Ropedo, what up? He hung out with me in the chat a couple of times. And Sinchi, I will get this name eventually. I'm sorry. I feel bad that I can't pronounce these gosh dang names right. I will get it. I promise I will get it. Just keep hammering it over my head. Anyways, levels and experience. Character levels are now capped at 50 with a soft cap starting in the late 30s. Expected endgame levels are mid-30s. Growth is otherwise linear except for the 3 humps after levels 10, 20, and 30. For more details, consult the experience/level chart in the print me. Level averaging. In the original game, characters were brought up to the same team's average level at set points throughout the game. This was a feature we initially removed entirely due to the above-mentioned issues with stat boosts from Espers, as well as to encourage using a variety of characters, rather than just the same 4 while everyone else sits on the bench. The EL system has since removed the first problem, so we reinstalled level averaging in a manner that only addresses the second. To the point, Level averaging now occurs at only one point in the game, aside from the initial averaging that's done for each character when they join, or in Shadow's case, every time he joins up with you in the World of Balance. Everyone gets re-averaged to a static level, see below, at the game's halfway mark, which is distinct from how they were originally re-averaged upon re-obtaining them. With it done this way, there's no longer any benefit of putting off getting anyone back. Celeste and Sabin, 18, Edgar, 19, Setzer, 20, everyone else, 21. Note, Esper levels can't be gained via re-averaging. Concerning the initial levels that characters join up at, that also has been changed. In the original game, most characters joined at slightly above the party average. Whereas now, everyone except Gogo, average -3, and Umaro, average +5, now joins at the exact average. Finally, there is now an option in the config menu to disable EXP gains, and by extension, spell point and EP gains from battle. This feature is mostly intended to challenge gamers trying a low-level game, but can also be useful for someone who wants to farm GP without over-leveling. So many different quality of life things to address so many different things and so many different play styles. It's amazing. The short explanation, NATB system, think. The short explanation of what this hack does is that it pauses the ATB timer during attack animations, and while the player is doing anything, the original game did not pause during fight targeting or while the Bushido meter was charging. This has two effects. One, it makes the speed contribute more significantly to how fast and how often a character acts in battle, as well as preventing it from effectively soft capping at around 60 or so. Two, it removes the exploiting of camping in the item menu under the weight setting to gain a huge speed advantage. Didn't know that. The resulting system is basically a modified version of weight, which I mentioned because there is no longer a active/weight setting, nor a battle speed slider. Speed balance. Cybaby Nawea. Or Nawea. Nawea? Apologies. Removing the soft cap from speed and thus allowing faster characters to get more turns over time turned it into something of a DPS god stat, if not just a god stat in general. In response to this, the overall effect of speed was lower. It was lowered at high levels while slightly raising the effective speed of slower characters. Refer to the below benchmarks comparing the number of turns gotten by several characters over the same time frame. Strago, 30 speed, turns old 4, turns new 4. Terra, speed 48, turns 5.33, turns new 5. Celeste, 32 speed, turns old 7, turns new 6. Shadow, 128 speed, turns 20.66, turns new 8.5. Nerf, old formula, math, new formula, math. Sorry. I appreciate that, though. Although I don't understand it. First strike, Cybaby, Ropedo. Contrary to the above change, a major intended feature of speed was to allow faster characters to act first in battle. The original formula to determine characters' initial ATB fill in battle took speed very little into account and was instead largely randomized. Speed is now factored more heavily, with faster characters like Locke and Shadow now getting first strike in battles much more often than not. Initial ATB fill math. Again, appreciate the detail, but it is lost on me. For Pincer and back attacks, initial ATB for characters was a modified version of the original formula above that didn't factor in speed or the number of entities in battle, typically resulting in a very low number. In Brave New World, the new formula above sets the first bracketed range to a fixed 2 speed, while also setting initial monster ATB values to full. Okay. Several status effects utilize a timer to determine when they wear off. Their durations have been reduced across the board to compensate for the fact that their incrementation is constantly being interrupted. New timer setting, stop 5 to 18. Let's start from the old, go to the new. Old timer setting, stop 18, now 5. Sleep 18, now 10. Freeze was 34, now 10. Reflect 24. Reflect now no longer reflects a time status. See reflect timer further below, and condemned, same thing. Note that cutting the timer for sleep in half renders its duration about the same as before, whereas stop and freeze were further shortened as a executive balanced decision. Condemned is a little bit tricky since its timer is generated by the following formula: random number, caster's level 2, math. This formula is largely identical to the one from the original game. All that's been changed is that both the end result and the minimum starting time have been cut in half to compensate for NATB. Slow and haste. Even small speed differences are significant in NATB. And also because the slow status is now a major element of boss fights. It was necessary to narrow the gap between the two speed impacting statuses. Old multipliers, slow times 32 to now times 60. Normal was times 64, is now times 75. Haste was times 84. Haste is now times 90. Quick fill. A notable result of the above changes is a net increase to the flow of combat due to the higher speed of all participants. More significantly, in order to minimize empty downtime, the speed of combat is now doubled when neither an action is occurring nor any character is ready to act. Quality of life, essentially a variable refresh speed change. Love it. Command delays. Complementary to the changes to battle speed in general, we have edited the delays between input and execution to balance various commands. Short delay, fight item, rage, dance, throw, sketch health, ? No delay, steal mug, runic, leap, mimic, revert, defend / row, possess, magic tech. Moderate delay, X magic / magic, tools, blitz, bushido, slots, GB toss, lore. Long delay, morph, summon, and huge ass delay, jump, airtime, which is fair. Note, X Magic's delay is effectively 40 in practice. Quick actions. The defend and row commands, in addition to the lack of an execution delay seen above, now only consume half a turn instead of an entire one. Quality of life, didn't know we needed, but glad we have it. See also Omni defend below. Hot swap delay. Swapping weapons and or shields in combat, which has previously a free action, now requires half a turn for one hand and a full turn for both. Makes sense. See also hot swap update below. Physical damage. The formula for physical, non-magical damage dealt by characters have been completely rewritten so that vigor plays a more significant role. Old damage formula, math. New physical damage formula, math. Vigor as defense. In addition to determining physical damage dealt, Vigor now helps reduce incoming physical damage as well. See random variants in the Stamina Overhaul section below for more details. Back row nerfs. The back row now only reduces incoming physical damage by 25%. Outgoing physical damage is not only still halved, but the penalty now extends to melee, i.e. short range damage dealt by tools, blitz, and bushido. It's only fair. For clarification, the only commands that inherently deal row ignoring physical damage regardless of weapon are jump and throw, as it should be. Blind accuracy. Further to the above, the blind status, renamed from dark, now affects all physical and stamina-based damage. See stamina attacks below. From special skills, all of which remain otherwise unblockable. Sketch, being classified as a magical attack, is a notable exception here, as is the chance to steal from enemies, though the attack from Mug is affected. Good to know. Thanks to DN for getting blind working with jump. In addition, hitting something in the backside, Pincer Attacks, is now affected by blindness, whereas previously a back attack would never miss under any circumstances. Interesting. Blindness is also no longer circumvented by weapons that never miss or by relics that grant perfect accuracy. Nice. No backstab bonus. One last note about hitting things in the back is that it no longer does extra damage. See Irregular Encounters further below for more details. Stamina Overhaul. Here we go. The first thing that was told to me about this game, and the thing that drew me in, that I didn't even know for a game that I played for 20 years. In the original game, stamina did as close to nothing as a stat could possibly do without actually doing nothing. Its main purpose was to act as an extra layer of evasion against instant death attacks, a role which is expanded here to include fractional damage, i.e. demi, redirectional damage, i.e. steals MP, MP damage, and all status effects. To further emphasize the role of stamina in defending you against such things, it's now the only evasion check against them. Good to know. Further to the above, stamina is now able to consider only the statuses set by attacks that also deal damage. Such attacks will use regular or magical evasion to determine hit success, and then runs a stamina check if the attack hits to see if the status also gets set. See informative miss below for how it's done. As with stamina evasion, see evade bug fix above, stamina checks are now a stamina / 128% chance of success. All of this is greatly simplified in the print me that means of listing the relevant evasion stat or stamina M evade for all avoidable attacks. Those with a separate stamina check for those who just check for just the status, see above, use the verbiage may set status instead of set status attacks that use stamina as the primary evasion stat. Well, of course, show the latter since the former would just be double dipping. The amount of detail that this game and this read-along goes through in order to explain why they're doing these things is fascinating to me. All of this is greatly simplified in the print me. Okay, I just read that, sorry. I was in all of this and I forgot where I was. It should be noted that while enemies in Brave New World don't have any magical evasion, they do possess stamina. The range of values is lowered here from 7040 to 132. Max HP 256, capping with 32 at 8192 HP. This is done so that weaker foes remain vulnerable to status effects, while those which work on bosses, sap and slow, retain at least a 75% chance to hit. Stamina variance. In addition to helping you avoid most of the nastier side effects of magical attacks, stamina now also acts as an additional layer of defense against their primary effects, in the same manner that Vigor now reduces physical damage. This is done via the game's random variance formula, which is applied to every attack that doesn't do a set amount of damage. Old random variance formula, math. New random variance formula, math. In the original game, random variance was a fixed range between 87% and 99% of the original value. In Brave New World, high vigor and or stamina will help you take less and more consistent damage from attacks. To better demonstrate this, here are some examples. Line numbers, we'll breeze past that. We'll just say 24 vigor stamina equals 92%, to 102%, all the way to 120 vigor / stamina equals 60%, with a note of a negligible amount of variance still applies, as to not make it useless. The 5 benchmarks on the top represent the initial values that most characters possess for vigor and stamina, while the 3 on the bottom show the effects of raising them via equipment and or espers. Note that the range of damage at 90 vigor / stamina is significantly smaller than at the earlier benchmarks, and the variance disappears almost completely at 120 when the ceiling hits the floor. Note, curative spells abilities still use the old variance formula. Stamina attacks. Less broadly, stamina is now a factor in several spells, attacks, commands, replacing the role of magic in most cases, making it more individually appealing to the characters that use them. This includes the Remedy and Regen spells, which now also cure HP. Harvester and Sunbath, Rage, Dance move, very good moves. Rock, Tentacle, and Shrapnel, Rage attacks. The Aura Bolt, Sonic Boom, Mantra, and Chakra blitzes. MP restored, Math. HP restored, Math. Bushido number 5, Dragon. Random wind attacks from certain weapons, Gale Cut. Dance, non-native dance success percentage equals 96 plus stamina. I divided by 2, divided by 255. Math. Morph, see morphology description below. Can't wait. GP toss, see make it rain description below. Umaro's blizzard attack, see Umaro hit hard below. The anima weapon, see the anima weapon. I've heard some things about this, description below. Desperation attacks, previously magic based, limit breaks. Interceptor, ditto, question mark, equals 3/4 level plus stamina. Level multiplied by stamina plus user's current HP. To be clear, all the above, except for anima weapon, are considered magical attacks for the purposes of the back row damage penalty and the plus 25% physical magical damage property on certain relics espers. They are, however, affected by the blind status as mentioned earlier. Exception, Aura Bolt is short range despite being non-physical. Tank and spank. Here we go. Counter to the above, which sells stamina as an alternative attack stat with some defensive capabilities, we wanted a way of meshing it with the other stats in a meaningful way. It was thus decided that it should be tied to two equipment-enabled abilities. Cover synergizes with HP, and counterattacks synergizes with Vigor. Hence, Tank and Spank. As was the case in vanilla, characters with true knight equipment will always take hits for allies who are at near fatal status, even if they themselves are also at critical HP. Now characters who are not in critical status themselves may also take hits for healthy allies. Cover percentage, healthy allies equals stamina, divided by 192. Math. There are some caveats to this, however. The defender must be in the front row to cover at all. The target, if not at low HP, must be in the back row. Okay, interesting. Further, a character's evasion is half when covering an ally, and he/she will lose the defend status if present. See also parry and counter and smart cover below. For the spank half of things, giggity, the game's original counterattack rate was 75%. We found this to be excessive once we got the other things sorted out, so we opted for a new formula that bases the counterattack rate on stamina, starting at a floor of 50%. Counterattack percent equals stamina plus 32 divided by 128. Math. Sap and regen. Moving on. The formulas for regen and sap poison, all of which are much more prominent here than they were originally, have been edited to allow the stamina to contribute more significantly towards raising the amount of HP restored by the former while now actually defending it against the latter. Originally, stamina raised the damage dealt by sap poison. Old regen sap formula, tick, math. If sap is on a player character, tick is half. New regen formula, math, note, random variance is 87% to 99%. New sap formula, math, note, random variance is a new formula for magical damage. Note that the first part of the formula is stored in a 8-bit value and is thus capped at 255. The minimum value for random variance is 1, so no regen or sap tick can exceed 254. However, because sap damage to the player characters was originally halved, it could never exceed 127, half. Poison changes. Poison works in a similar manner to sap, except that it only ticks half as frequently, and each tick deals incrementally more damage. Originally, the increment value was equal to the initial tick for both enemies and player characters. In Brave New World, the amount of damage is doubled for each tick on enemies, making it a more worthwhile status to inflict. We've also corrected an error in the original code wherein the variable that increments with each tick doesn't reset when the status is cleared. So poison ticks will now start back over at the beginning if the status is reapplied to the same unit in the same battle rather than picking back up where they left off. Random number good. The original game's notoriously streaky random number generator has been gutted and replaced with a new one that wipes clean without leaving any streaks behind. After realizing that I had done nothing intelligent to say about this hack beyond that, I asked Think to describe it himself. Normally, the game uses a lookup table for its random number generation. It has 256 numbers permanently written down and hands them out. 1 at one at a time whenever one is needed, starting over from the beginning whenever it runs out. This is a bad implementation for several reasons. The random numbers repeat very frequently, resulting in repeated results occurring in surprisingly close together. 2. The table is poorly organized, with streaks of poor results in a row that are unlikely to occur in a true random sequence because of this size. While streaks of this nature can and should occur in a truly random sequence, the result is a obviously streaky RNG. Streaky RNG when combined with point number 1. If you know the table, you can have full control of all the random numbers in the game. To solve this, we replace the lookup table with an actual RNG algorithm, XOR shift for the curious, and added a frame counter, thus rendering it essentially impossible for the human player to predict the next output of the RNG. You would need to know the exact frame you're on at any given time and have a giant reference table handy, and allowing for good and bad luck to occur at random instead of at predetermined intervals. Irregular Encounters. In the original games, the chance of any eligible random number being a pincer or a side attack was 7 out of 255 for either one, or a combined total chance of just over 5%. While the back attacks had a more favorable 30 to 255, roughly 1/8 chances of an appearance in Brave New World, all three non-standard encounter types each have a 32/255, exactly 1/8 chance of being called, making it much more common. An RNG oversight caused these odds to be even lower in practice. Pincer attacks in particular were rare in the original game because the back attack bonus would bonus to physical damage meant that the happenstance pincer attack would often end in an unlucky player's game with no recourse. Side attacks saw enemies suffering a similar fate, and any boss battle that took place in either one of the two had severe balance issues due to it. As mentioned earlier, the backstab bonus is removed in Brave New World, and the challenge of side and pincer attacks instead focuses more on the increased difficulty of targeting your commands. For example, healing in a side attack is harder because regular cure spells can only be spread to cover one side of the field. Further, any ability that targets an ally group, i.e. the Regen X spell, will also be unable to affect your entire party. Only abilities that specifically target all of your allies, such as Holy Wind, can do so. Back attacks are much easier to understand. The drawbacks are that your character's rows are inverted, and the enemy party gets the first action explained above. Pincer attacks also follow the same rules, except that all of your characters are treated as if they were in the front row. Good to know. 10-step battles. One of the more aggravating aspects of random encounters in the original game was their frequent tendency to randomly occur within 1 or 2 steps of one another. This is now a minimum of 10 steps between random battles under most circumstances. This value is lower on the overworld map, and in certain dungeons. Formation odds. The appearance of probabilities in the last 2 enemy formations in a pack have been changed from 5 out of 16 and 1 out of 16 to 3 out of 16 each. This allows for a greater variety of enemy encounters, particularly in larger areas. Conditional Behavior. Conditional Behavior. While the focus of Brave New World is the new Esper system and character development, its enemies are the vehicles through which that ambition is fully realized. If the fun of the game is building up and customizing your team, then the final product is only entertaining so long as it provides opportunities and incentives to put those skills and abilities to use. The vast majority of Brave New World's initial and continued development is thus dedicated towards restructuring the game's enemies in a way that meaningfully complements its character design. Enemies in the original game were not particularly complex, and the few that were died so fast that you'd never know it. Excuse me. Brave New World treats enemies as puzzles to be solved instead of beef gates to be power leveled through, and so there's a strong element of figure out what makes this enemy behave more aggressively and prevent it from happening at play. Bigger, stronger enemies tend to be more docile unless they're attacked first or their companions are killed, while weaker ones appear in larger numbers and may use stronger attacks if not dealt with quickly. The goal is to identify how to deal with each individual encounter as effectively as possible and without getting yourself killed. If you're the type of player that just mashes A to win, then Brave New World is not for you. While many enemies in Brave New World behave accordingly to the template described in the above paragraph, there are several other conditionals that can alter their behavior, such as responding to the presence of a particular status effect, either on your party members or on themselves. Status effects are a major factor in Brave New World, especially in the later game when enemy encounters become more difficult to deal with just by killing them quickly or in the correct order. It's my personal belief that status effects are the biggest X factor that separates an engaging battle system from a numbers game like War, the card game. And the overall design of Brave New World heavily reflects that belief. Another alternate conditional that a few enemies in Brave New World utilize is to just harness the last character to have attacked it. This targeting method was slightly flawed in vanilla since it didn't make an exception for confused friendlies, and it could easily lead to enemy mobs beating the shit out of each other. Here, they'll only go after you. Vindication, sorry. Melee/MP counter. Despite the simplicity of how it was used, the original game's AI engine was actually quite robust for its time, allowing enemies to identify and respond to any combination of specific spells, skills, and/or commands. What it couldn't do was distinguish between physical and magical damage, nor could it determine whether the attack was melee, i.e. respects row, or range. Which it makes sense when you think of this mechanic in the context of being used for counterattacks. Thus, many foes in Brave New World will counter any row respecting physical damage, be it a sword swing or Edgar's chainsaw, but will not counter with an attack from a ranged weapon like Boomerang or Edgar's auto crossbow. Note, a bug/feature of this hack is that enemies only consider the last portion of an attack to determine what type it is, and so the check will return false so long as the second weapon, if dual wielding, is set to ignore row, or if the last part of the attack was a random spell cast. Interesting. The next part of this hack also allows foes to identify an attack that damages MP instead of or in addition to HP. This functionality is used mostly on certain bosses where such attacks might be useful. Pro tip, all undead enemies, including bosses, die at 0 MP in Brave New World. Death counters. The original game dedicated a significant amount of AI code to ensuring that enemies with counterattacks will not do so when the attack which triggered them was fatal. Sorry. This code has been removed in Brave New World, often leading to unobservant players who incorrectly assume that enemies in Brave New World have death counters, rather than counterattacks that simply aren't prevented by death. However, as part of Brave New World's heavy focus on status effects to disable opponents, the enemy death routine no longer clears them before processing reactive enemy AI. Thus, a sleeping enemy will not counter an attack, physical or otherwise, that kills it. Interesting. X-Magic counter. Although the norm in Brave New World is that only melee attacks can be countered, some enemies, bosses in particular, retain that capacity to counter any attack. This was slightly problematic for X-Magic users in particular since it was originally executed as two separate commands and therefore ran an increased risk of not only eating a counterattack, but possibly eating two of them. In Brave New World, X-Magic is treated as a single uninterrupted command with only one reactive AI check. Life cycles. Speaking of bosses in Brave New World, something else that they can do that was not possible in the original game is to have more than 65,535 HP. This is done by coding lives into the enemy's reactive AI and doesn't necessarily require any assembly work to pull off. However, any damage that bypasses the reactive AI check, such as a sap tick or a counterattack, will screw with this method and will cause your boss to die prematurely. Examples of this issue can be seen in the vanilla game anytime a boss dies with a normal death animation instead of the special boss one. In response to this, any boss that breaks the 16-bit HP cap in Brave New World is flagged simply to not die when their HP is at 0. This forces them to die a scripted death only in response to being attacked, meaning that while sap damage is an important aspect of boss fights in Brave New World, bosses cannot actually die from it or from counterattacks. Interesting. Evade Bug Fix. Interesting. Here it goes. This is some good stuff. Physical and magical evasion now function properly instead of magical evasion covering both types and physical evasion doing nothing at all. For the sake of simplicity, for the sake of being simple, the accuracy of all avoidable attacks, both physical and magical, have been set to 101% times, math, whatever, so that the chance to hit is simply evasion / or divided by 128%, maybe, math. Of course, of note, Of note is that while many foes in Brave New World do possess physical evasion, they do not have any magical evasion. Thus, any magic evadable attack will only ever miss against the player. Good to know. Exceptions: Drain / Osmos 90% and Rock Meteo 80%. Evasion statuses. Fixing the coding system awaken a dormant mechanic from deep within the game's code wherein all physical attacks will gain accuracy bonus or penalties if the target has certain statuses set. Some of these made sense and were left alone, like how being slowed, blinded, muddled, or zombied will now make the afflicted easier to hit. Others, mostly oddly the Re-Rise, aka Life 3, statuses being the subject of the same penalty, were not wise and were thrown in the trash where they belong. The big issue, however, wasn't with the accuracy bonuses, but rather the penalties when attacking targets affected by haste, sap, poison, and near-fatal statuses. Not only did none of these make any sense except for haste, but haste was OP enough already. Their newfound ubiquity in Brave New World, haste and sap in particular, made balancing the physical game hell. Needless to say, they're gone now. Parry and counter. On the flip side to the above, a multifunctional evasion system combined with several characters who are very much built for it, Lock and Shadow come immediately to mind, rendered the randomly counters property less than useful since the characters could originally only counter attacks that had successfully hit them, in which Shadow's case usually left them too dead to retaliate. We have removed... Hey, BTB! Thanks for stopping in. I said I was going to do it, and I did it. I am going through this README. I am going through it, giving my expert analysis, and I'm using that word lightly. And staying hydrated, of course, because we all got to stay hydrated. I'm telling you, going through this has given me a new level of appreciation on top of all of the layers of appreciation I have thrown on this game. It is fascinating to see the gears turning in the background and to have a direct tap to the mindset of you guys putting all this stuff together. Just getting ready for work. Well, I do appreciate you stopping by. I am also now aware I can export these streams from Twitch and upload them to my YouTube page for prosperity, so I don't have to save it locally. I'm learning more about how to use Twitch and this game by the day. So every day is a school day. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. This may also feed into a possible live stream from 8 to 10 tonight. This is a dinner night for me. Excuse me. So I will actually be enjoying real food. And I always put aside time for that. So, back to business. I'll be back a little after 7 when I get to the office. Well, we'll be here, King. We'll be here. Your time 7 or my time 7? Because it's already 7 over here. With all that being said, let's get back into it. Smart cover. Hold on. Alright. Smart cover. My time. That's fair. This fixes the Protect Allies effect to behave more intelligently than before. Primarily, it disables blocking attacks that originate from your own team under most circumstances. Which has the significant benefit of preventing party members from being protected versus healing weapons. See ally retargeting below. Muddled/zombie characters will be allowed to hit themselves, but not their teammates. One notably important change in light of the fact that characters can now cover non-critical allies, see tank and spank above, is that cover will no longer activate on an enemy counterattack, only proactive attacks. Cover is also disabled under the following other conditions: if bodyguard has blind, berserk, image, magitech, muddle, sleep, death, stone, zombie, clear. If target has image, magitech, death, stone, zombie, clear, unchanged. This game was programmed by monkeys, I swear. Note that the changes only apply to the cover effect under normal circumstances. The love token ability will cause its target to cover the caster, accepting only the statuses that were originally considered. Finally, the cover is disabled entirely if Golem is active. and attacks that would be nullified / absorbed by the intended target are also not blocked. Interceptor will also not show up if Shadow is covering someone else. But I love Interceptor though. I love that dog. See also the X-Fight effect further below. Vanish / Doom Fix, Terry Senshi. One of the original game's more infamous bugs, and one of the select few to warrant a shitty patch job in all subsequent releases, regarded the clear status circumventing instant death attacks. Yes. This issue is fixed properly in Brave New World, shoutouts to Terry Senshi, instead of by, I shit you not, just making bosses immune to vanish like Final Fantasy VI Advance does. Funny you mentioned that. Because your boy got that game and played it and loved it. Didn't know any better. A game that I've played for 25 years and that I've played multiple times over various different platforms. Special Death Fix. Think. Lesser known and infinitely less exploitable than Vanish Doom Bug is where the enemy's special attacks that cause instant death would flat out ignore death immunity altogether, vanish or not. The root cause of both bugs is the roundabout way that the code treats death as a status, and the general lack of enemy specials in the original game that are set to apply death lead me to believe that the developers had to have been aware of this bug, at least on some level. In any case, it's fixed now. Good job, guys. Overcast Fix Assassin. Similar to the above, this fix an issue with an attack called Overcast, forcibly setting zombie on your party irregardless of immunity. This led to it being impossible to remedy due to how immunities work in the game. Overcast now simply no longer bypasses zombie immunity. Vanish / clear fixes, sigh baby. Finally, going back to the original subject of the clear status, it's no longer removed from floating targets when ground-based attacks, i.e. Quake, don't hit them, or from Celeste when she absorbs a spell with Runic. Further, spells cast by using rods as items will now remove the status. Abort on enemies. Failing the old Vanish / Doom trick, and vanilla player's primary fallback for any undead enemies, including bosses, was simply to toss a Phoenix down or revivify. I'm gonna skip that. I'm sorry. I'm gonna just be straight up. I don't know how to read that word. Let me give it a try. Revivify, and call it a day. In Brave New World, all items except for dried meat are hard-coded not to work on enemies at all. Quite a few of the original game's laundry lists of bugs tend to involve hitting enemies with stuff that's not meant to be used on them. Palador being a rather notable offender. Curiously, there's a targeting flag in the game's code to abort an attack in the event that it somehow ends up targeting the party. Yet there's no equivalent for your enemies, where such a flag is actually needed, and in Brave New World now exists. Good job. And as for that stuff that's fine on regular enemies, but not on bosses. Boss immunity. The suplex bite, which originally prevented suplex from targeting certain enemies, primarily those of the floating or stationary variety, is now hard override to prevent fractional damage attacks, i.e. demi, quarter, from being cheesed against bosses. Such attacks originally were set to miss anything immune to instant death, so that instant death attacks were thus always preferable. Fractional damage now deals earth and or wind damage and follows suit with other earth and wind attacks by being generally very powerful but unable to hit a weakness due to lack of them, though some enemies still resist them. And yes, suplex works on everything now. Have fun pile driving Kefka. Ha! Interesting. Short eye, like Vivian. Revivify. Does that sound right? Oh, look. We have Andrew. I'm sorry. I'm bad with saying things, obviously. Nailed it. Thank you. Andrew C. in the chat. Thank you for stopping by and hanging out. We are reading the README that came with the Brave New World Final Fantasy VI patch. And I'm having a lot of fun reading it because it's giving me more insight into the game that I've been live streaming for the past week or so and absolutely have fallen in love with. And everybody stopping by and saying hi. and just being a part of this has really encouraged me to keep going and do more things. This is the first time I'm doing any kind of read through like this. I'm having a lot of fun. So, back to it. Genji Glow Fix. Dual wielding weapons now results in a 25% decrease in damage from both weapons, as it was originally intended to do. Note that this patch has been modified from the original version to only affect regular physical attacks instead of all attacks that deal physical damage, i.e. Blitz. Dual wind damage. Another modification to this patch allows the damage penalty to affect weapons that randomly deal AoE wind damage, Gale Cut, I could think of. Are you, let me see. No worries, big fan of the patch, just hanging out during a workout. Never seen someone stream its readme. Hey, groundbreaking stuff right here. We are trendsetters. Absolute mad lads here. So let me ask a question in the chat if everybody can give me the answer. I'm hearing from my boy Lokar. I'm asking him if he's watching on his phone. He's saying video looks like it's buffering low res style. Not sure if it's me or not. Hey, we have a follower. I appreciate you, Andrew C. Thank you so much. I actually now was able to see one of those things pop up live, and I got the sound effect too. So, man, putting in that work just to have it happen, and now I'm one step closer to my 30 follower goal, so that means so much to me. I appreciate it. Back to it. Genji Glow Fix. Dual wielding weapons now results. Okay, we were there. Note that this patch has been modified from the original version to only affect regular physical attacks instead of all attacks that deal physical damage, i.e. Blitz. Dual damage, we did that. I think we did that. Yes, because I was talking about Gale Cut. See also the Gauntlet Fix below for more on this. Dual wield weapons. Frame rate looks good to me. I appreciate that. Thank you. It's weird. I just looked at a past broadcast and I can see text clearly. The live one isn't so much. I'm still trying to get clarification if my friend Lokar is watching this on his phone, which is probably why he's getting the low res version of it. According to the chat, frame rate and everything looks fine. Also, I got another follower. Don't mind me. I have like 5 screens in front of me. I'm probably going to have ADHD off of all this. It's hard to keep my focus straight. Okay, it might be me. Fair. All right, back to it. Dual wield weapons. Finally, note that the dual wield property is now attached to a certain weapon. See the print me rather than to a relic. Yes, one of the main reasons I love this game. Any weapon possessing the dual wield ability allows a second weapon to be used regardless of whether or not the second one allows for it. A sword and a dagger combo, for an example, is a valid setup. I'm on phone too. Well, he has an Android. I'm gonna say, well, okay. I'm not going to be decisive. I'm not going to be non-inclusive. He has an Android phone, but we don't speak about that. All phones are valuable. Lost my place again. Apologies. The only exception to the above is spears, which are disallowed in dual wield setups because I spent most of the mod's development running Mog with a spear boomerang. And I will get this right, I swear. Just let me keep going at it. It's fine now. Sorry, buddy. No worries. I appreciate the info. I will get this name right. Sin Chi Si. Same quality. It's on him, I bet. It actually bumped up on his end, so everything is good. But I always appreciate the input. Listen. Let me get this straight. I'm gonna shoot from the hip here. I need people to tell me if I'm lacking because that's the only way I'm gonna learn. I do not take things personally. Any kind of criticism is something that will help me make the experience better for everybody. So by all means, it's always on me. Hey, Lokar in the chat, what up, man? Thank you for dropping in. We had BTB in here. He was checking it out before he went to work. We got a brand new follower in Andrew C. I appreciate you. If I'm pronouncing your name wrong, please let me know. I am notorious for mispronouncing everybody that's been through here. So, back to it. Because Sin Chisi thought it was bloody stupid. Anyway, dual wheel jump. Bropedo, who another friend that drops into the chat. In the original game, using the jump command with a dual wield setup was a poor idea since only one weapon chosen at random would be used for the attack. It's still not the greatest idea in Brave New World, but it's at least more consistent. The jumper will always attack only with their primary weapon, sans the 25% damage penalty for dual wielding. Hey, let me get a quick question off in the chat. I've been messing with the audio settings. Can you hear a little bit of music in the background? Is it too much? Is it too loud? Is it there at all? I keep trying to tweak this stuff. Gauntlet fix. Holding certain weapons in both hands now increases battle power by 50% rather than 75%. This was done because, as with the dual wield property, two-handed functionality is now applied to specific weapons rather than enabled by a relic, and the game's original bonus led us to some balance issues. Think Dragoon. A modified version of this hack made by Assassin is also used to accurately display their battle power in the equip menu. Two-hand wind attack. Gale cut, Cyan, my man. As also with the above hack, a 50% damage bonus will also apply to wind attacks randomly cast from the Japanese word or Japanese word. Should I dare? Kazikuri or Mutsuno Kami. Apologies. If they are held in both hands. Combined, these hacks allow for a very noticeable balance between those weapons when used by Shadow, who typically dual wields, and Cyan, who is forced to use both hands since he can't use a shield. Two-handed weapons. Finally, note that using two hands for weapons that allow it is entirely optional, except for Cyan, who, as noted above, is forced to do so by his equipment restrictions, specifically giving Edgar or Mog a spear and a shield, i.e. the Sparta setup, is allowable. A two-handed weapon will turn yellow if the other hand is empty to indicate that the damage bonus is present. Nice. Else it will appear in white as normal. Elemental mixing, think Bropedo. This hack greatly improves the way that the game handles resistance to multi-elemental damage. In the original game, the highest resistance to any element present would always take precedence, regardless of weakness or non-resistance to any others. Here, it's more of a sliding scale. Immunity to a multi-elemental attack now requires immunity to both elements. Damage is halved if only one element is immune, while a weakness to the other will result in normal damage. Fair. Resistance to only one element is the same as immunity to only one. Okay? Absorption of element trumps all else, even weakness to the other. Oh no. Which is fair, I guess. This hack also applies to mixing weaknesses and resistances to the same element on a player character, namely when Gao takes on enemy weaknesses through rage. In this case, the above rule still applies, except that only resistance will be cancelled out by the weakness to result in normal damage, while immunity or higher will override a weakness. Okay, good to know, good to hear. Omni Defend. The defend battle now has both physical and magical damage instead of just physical damage. This is a rather important hack for the crazies who are trying to level or trying for a level 1 Gogo. And yes, it's been done. Absolute mad lads. Ally retargeting. Curative items and weapons will now properly retarget to a random ally if the intended target becomes invalid before the command is executed, with the curative weapons in this case being realms paintbrushes. Brush targeting. In addition to retargeting properly on death, brushes will now correctly target your party by default unless the user is muddled or berserked. Item retention, similar to the first issue, If an item user dies or is disabled before the command executes, the item will no longer be consumed regardless. Nice. Good to know. I didn't even know that existed. Good to know that it's been fixed. Sketch fixes. First and foremost, using sketch should no longer cause the universe to implode on itself, assassin. Second, the sketch formula now uses realm stats instead of the target, so it's actually worth using. Nice. Brushless sketch. Finally, sketch is now disallowed unless a brush is equipped by a patch called Brushless Sketch, which does pretty much the exact opposite of what its name suggests. Because painting with a knife is something that only psychopaths do, which Realm kind of is, come to think about it. Note, Bob Ross is famous for using the palette knife in his paintings, and actually there are supercuts on YouTube of Bob Ross specifically using the knife. And in fact, I think there was actually an episode where he did a painting with nothing but that. Auto Swordless Runic. Similar to Brushless Sketch Patch, Auto Swordless Runic keeps Celeste from spamming the ever-loving shit out of Runic when she's muddled, or at the Coliseum if she does not have a sword equipped. Non-elemental Runic. We've also corrected a bug wherein Runic spells would not be stripped of their elemental properties, so protection from any element would also protect Celeste or Gogo from absorbing the spell's MP cost. Persistent Rage Fix. So called because the original name is stupid, sorry assassin, and not really descriptive of what the patch does. What it does is recalculates resistances whenever Gal dies, so that elemental immunities weaknesses he gains through rage won't persist and stack throughout battle. Rage status patch. This is an extension of the above, which makes it also affect statuses. There are several problems here that stem primarily from the fact that the game interrupts status immunities, such as status cannot be toggled. Thus, a rage that grants an immunity would make that status unremovable except via death, and if it was already present when the rage was entered. The other problem is a combination of two factors. The game treats any inherent status granted by equipment or through rage as an immunity to that status, and the in-battle routine to update status immunities failed to clear several of them, including regen, haste, float, slow, and stop. As a result, gaining any of these statuses through rage or equipment would render them permanent for the duration of the battle. Yes. These three things are done to address these issues. First, and most obviously, the above-mentioned statuses are now included in the routine to update status immunities. Secondly, when Gao enters a rage, he is purged of all statuses that the rage grants immunity to. Third, the routine to update immunities now removes any inherent statuses that it clears. Hot swap update. The third point may seem extraneous since the only way to lose the rage status is to die, which clears all statuses regardless. However, this routine is also called when changing out weapons and or shields in combat, which has the same persistent status issues as rage. The routine now also properly updates the maximum HP/MP as per equipment bonuses, which was irrelevant in vanilla since no weapons or shields had them. Note, it is possible to lose the rage status without dying in Brave New World. Good to know. Impology. Imp was always one of the more misunderstood effects in Final Fantasy VI, since it wasn't very upfront about what it did, and even didn't seem to have a very good idea about what it was trying to be. It was a weird sort of offensive debuff mute hybrid that didn't even behave the same way on enemies as it did on your party. And don't even get me started on how buggy the animation was. It still is seen known issues later on. Now, Imp is a simple output debuff, 50% off everything, both offensively and healing-wise. It's basically the exact opposite of Morph, see below, except that it doesn't affect incoming damage. Attacks and spells with fixed or fractional damage are unaffected, but the penalty does apply to sap and regen ticks for the same reason that the Morph bonus does. Morphology. Terra's Morph ability is now a toggled stance rather than a timed one. Rather than doubling her offensive output and having all magic damage taken, it now boosts her output by 50% at the expense of doubling all damage taken. This damage penalty is reduced by 1/128th for each point of stamina that Terra has, down to a minimum of 25% at 96 stamina. It's important to note that the 50% output boost from Morph applies to pretty much everything. The Morph bonus is added to damage calculation as a multiplier, in which the original game are ignored by any attack that ignores defense. This is no longer true. Defense ignoring spells and abilities now respect multipliers. Gotta respect multipliers. This includes curative spells, which ignores defense as a obvious necessity. On the subject of healing, the above-mentioned damage penalty does not distinguish between incoming damage and incoming healing. Everything will hit her for higher numbers, except for fixed or fractional values. This means that although Terra will be more fragile in her Esper state, she will also be much easier to heal. Where things start to get confusing is Sap and Regen ticks, which both receive Morph Damage Multiplier because that code considers those things to be Terra hitting herself. Why are you hitting yourself? For that same reason. However, they are further boosted by the penalty that doubles all incoming damage. This means that the same stat which raises the strength of her regen ticks in the first place will, in fact, lower the boost they get from Morph, making the whole mess a wash. Treasure hunting, my boy Locke in the play. Steel Mug no longer takes the level of treasure hunter or victim into consideration and is now just a straight up roll against the RNG that uses the hunter speed percentage of success equals math. Rare steal. Speed also affects the likelihood of a rare steal speed math instead of a flat 1/8 chance in the original games, making it more common in the later game with a bit of investment in lock speed. Quick steal. Further to the above, successful steal attempts are now treated by the game as a free action and will immediately refill the ATB gauge of the character who performed it. Note that this also applies to random steal attempts made by a certain knife. Good to know. Switchblade. This allows a Mug command to act as a multi-attack rather than just a regular one with a plus a thief attempt. Mug effects. Weapons now retain special properties when used with Mug, such as the anti-human property of Butterfly or Man-Eater, or the special effect of the Adama weapon. The only exception is the random anti-flying proc on thrown weapons, see special effects below, that would look seriously jacked up on a melee strike. Aside from that, however, Mug is now equal to the fight command in terms of damage under any circumstances. Thank you. Why we fight. To balance the above concerns so that Mug isn't just fight but better, the attack will miss if the steal attempt is unsuccessful. So this includes failure due to the target not possessing an item, so Mug should only be used against enemies that are carrying something. And on that note, 2 legs good. As mentioned earlier, treasure hunting has been standardized so that only humanoid enemies have items for the taking. This not only made it easier for me to balance stealables since I had far fewer foes to work with, but it also made it much easier for players to figure out which enemies are worth the effort to hunt from. Bushido Blade. Nice. Physical damage, Bushido techniques, Dispatch, Flurry, and Tempest now account for the user's equipped sword to influence their strength rather than having a set power that doesn't improve with better weapons. But more importantly, Sword Tech Charger. Bushido no longer takes ability lifetime to charge up, making the damn skill actually usable. I appreciate that. The meter now charges at an acceptable rate, and the speed will further increase as more techniques are learned. Lovely. Great to hear. Leap anywhere. The leap command can now be used on any rageable formation, regardless of whether or not you're on the Veldt. Whether this does give Gao earlier access to some key rages in certain areas it's mostly a quality of life hack that makes it much easier to collect all of his rages, which I appreciate. Leap also no longer ends the current battle. Rather, it will remove Gao from the party for its duration. He's counted as dead for the purposes of what happens if the rest of your party dies. He will learn the rages of the enemy party, whether you win the fight or run. If Gao knows all of the rages in the formation already, Leap is disabled. Quality of life. Easy rage hunting. Brave New World completely redesigns the original game's enemy encounter structure specifically to make collecting every rage on the Veld itself as quickly and as easy as reasonably possible. Also, any rageable formation that can be missed, i.e. appears in an area that you can't go back to, can be found in the Grenade Forest or the Triangle Island. World of Balance only. Also see rage description and alphabetical rage further below for more on what we've done to make the skill more user-friendly to use, which actually, surprise, incredible, I know, makes me want to do it. Throw effects. As with Mug, weapons now retain all of their special effects when used with throw, namely the ×2 damage to humans property of Butterfly and Man-Eater knives. Again, excluding the random throw ability on several knives, because of a random chance of the thing you've thrown being thrown is the because of a random chance of the thing you're throwing being thrown is the kind of stupid ass shit you saw in the original game. For those of you who are curious how throw determines its damage, it's basically a regular attack with the weapon being thrown that ignores the user's throw, the target's defense, and is given a 100% damage boost. Gogo throw. Gogo can now still use throw even if Shadows is no longer available. Good doggo. Although Shadow's dog block status provides a 50% chance to avoid any physical attacks before standard evasion is even considered, Interceptor would inexplicably appear less frequently later in the original game than he did earlier on. This is because after it was determined that Doggo had blocked an attack, the game would choose randomly from a pool of every applicable evade animation from Shadow's equipment instead of always using the dog. Correcting this does not affect Shadow's evasion at all, but it does largely increase the odds of Interceptor's counterattacks, 50% chance of countering any blocked attack, so 1 out of 4 odds overall. See also goal and fixes further below. Rage and dance odds. The 2 attacks on each rage are now common, 2 1/3 chance of being used, and uncommon, 1 out of 3 odds instead of it being a 50-50 chance. Similarly, the second and third steps of each dance now have a 5 out of 16 and 3 out of 16 odds instead of 6 out of 16 and 2 out of 16 respectively. Because both of these changes combine with the overall of the attacks involved, because diversity is a thing now. Glad to see. Very progressive. Slot de-rigging. The slots command is no longer rigged to force certain outcomes based on how the RNG is feeling. It's now entirely timing based, and the reels have been edited to group the symbols together, Final Fantasy VII style. Good to know. Good to know. Refer to the print me for a full list of spins and their effects. Furthermore, the 7/7 bar FU spin has been disabled, and 3 bars no longer skips over Odin as a potential result. However, they now ignore Phoenix to prevent a bug where Setzer will take 1 extra step forward for every living character in the party when he uses it. Make it rain. The formula for GP Toss, aka GP Rain, has been reworked to make it an attack actually worth using, particularly for a stamina-built Setzer. Old GP Rain formula, math. New GP Toss formula, math. Further, GP Toss has been designed as a free targeting attack. Press left or right bumper to target multiple foes instead of being forcibly multi-targeted. This is a particularly important feature for GP Toss given its special damage split formula that penalizes damage output for every target hit rather than the flat 50% penalty used by most other attacks. Umaro hit hard. He do though. Umaro has 4 attacks, a regular fight attack and 3 special ones, 2 of which are enabled by specific relics. If you count the fact that his base stats and the battle power of his Bone Club have been adjusted, all 4 of them have been changed in Brave New World. To be honest, I didn't really play much of Umaro in the original game, but it'll be good to see what is in store for him in this one. Tackle, which is always available, is basically just his regular fight command set to ignore defense. Because Umaro's base battle power combined with that of his weapon give his regular attacks a maxed out battle power of 255, this is basically his equivalent of Bum Rush. The unnamed character toss ability enabled by the Storm Belt was initially just tackle set to add the battle power of the character being tossed to Umaro's. However, since the battle power is a 8-bit value, read it caps at 825, this didn't end up being as significant as it was meant to be. In other words, it was a clone of tackle. It now has a set power of 225 with the gauntlet bonus applied for an effective power of 382. Further, it now deals critical damage if the character being thrown is Mog, as it was originally intended to do, but didn't because of a bug. Yikes. As always, Umaro will prioritize throwing allies with the muddle or sleep statuses, as this attack will remove them. Good to know. Blizzard, formerly Storm, which is the Blizzard Orb's relics, which the Blizzard Orb relic enables, no longer does half damage, aka split loss, if more than one target is present. Its power has been lowered slightly, 100 to 90, but Umaro's stats more than make up for that. Note that this is the same Blizzard that appears in the Snowmen Jazz Dance. Refer to the print me for details. With 2 notable distinctions. 1, it uses Umaro's stamina to determine its damage rather than its non-existent magic power. 2, it bypasses the enemy stamina check to see whether or not it sets blind. Yeti attack odds. The odds of each attack being used also have been adjusted. Previously, they varied depending on whether Umaro had one or both of his special relics equipped. Having both one was often undesirable, as the odds of Rage or Storm being used were higher if only their one special relic was equipped. Now, to simplify things, all 3 of Umaro's special attacks now have a hard 76 255, roughly 30% chance of being used. Otherwise, Umaro would use his regular fight command. If this gives fight a 179 to 255 chance, roughly 70% of being used if neither special relic is present, 103 out of 255 odds, or 40% if one is equipped, and 10% if both are. Bare Naked Yeti. Finally, Umaro's equipment menu is no longer locked down, so you can now unequip him just like a normal character. This change was made purely to correct the bug in the original game wherein unequip all of your dude wouldn't take Umaro's relics away, since it would also remove his other equipment that you then would have no way to get back onto him. And yes, we're aware that the snow muffler he comes with in vanilla is meant to be his natural fur coat, which is why he can't be taken off for him. We just like to think of your party shears him like a sheep. Alright, we got some lore. Got some lore for that. Special weapon effects. Many of the special weapon effects in Brave New World are either changed from the vanilla incarnations or entirely new effects altogether. Entangle. The Kusu Arigama and Kagenyu, both weapons for Shadow, have a new effect wherein they have a 50% chance of inflicting slow and stop when they're a target, in addition to dealing damage. These weapons are notable as they are Shadow's only access to either status, and slow is of particular importance in Brave New World due to its effectiveness on bosses. In addition to the Entangle effect, Kusarigama, whatever, words also deals double damage to humans, while the Kagenui enables X-Fight, effectively raising the chances to entangle with each attack to 75%. Breaking Wind, LOL. The Tempest, or Kazakiri in Japan, was a katana in the original game which, when attacked with, had the 50% chance of hitting every enemy with Wind Slash Gale Cut. Instead of dealing regular physical damage, it was discussed earlier that both the dual wield penalty and the two-handed damage bonus both now apply to this attack. But it's also noteworthy that this wind attack itself is now actually a stronger version of Wind Slash, power 60. More drastically, the Mutsun Okami Sky Render in Vanilla, and a brand new rod weapon for Strago and Realm both now have the same effect, except that they instead cast a much stronger power 120 version of Arrow. Special thanks for Madsur for speeding up the long-ass animation. Zantetsuken. The 1-in-4 cleave effect on Zantetsuken, also used by the Ichi Monichi, will now deal critical damage to targets who are immune to instant death, or when used with Jumper Mug, since this animation would otherwise cause issues with those commands. As a interesting side note, this effect won't prevent ordinary critical hits 1 out of 32 from occurring, resulting in a 1 out of 128 chance of a double critical hit. Oh my goose. Chainsaw Massacre. I still haven't got my chainsaw for Edgar yet because I am a fool. Similar to above, the 1-in-4 hockey mask probability on the chainsaw was edited so that the instant death effect is in addition to the damage dealt rather than instead of it. The chainsaw insta-kills now use this cleave death animation instead of the normal one, which is mechanically beneficial in that it prevents counterattacks. Undead Slayer. Again, similar to the above, what you get here is a 50% chance of instant death, except that it only works on the undead. As with the Zantetsuken, undeads immune to instant death instead take critical damage. Note that this effect uses X-kill animation that certain weapons from the original game used, like I got on my boy Setzer, except instead of being useless against the undead, it now behaves identically to cleave animation by preventing counterattacks from the dead-er target. Anti-flying weapons. 2 special type weapons from the original game, the Sniper and the Hawkeye, had an undocumented extra effect wherein they had a 50% of being thrown at the enemy as part of their normal attack animation. All other long-range weapons were thrown as part of their normal attack animation, which makes this weird. For an additional 50% damage to most enemies, or a whopping 200% more damage if the target enemy was floating, the large discrepancy rendered them a bit overpowered in the situations where they were useful and on the useless side otherwise. Thus the damage boost for grounded weapons has been raised to 100%, and the strength of these weapons have been balanced accordingly. This effect has been branded as strong versus flying foes, is now a standard feature on the special line of thrown weapons, as well as several of Shadow's daggers. Ostensibly, a bug with its vanilla behavior, the animation now correctly plays whenever a proc occurs instead of only against floating targets. For a similar reason, the effect is now disabled by the jump command and is specifically ignored by the hacks that allow Mug and Throw to otherwise respect special properties, since all of them will override the special animation and would simply deal more damage seemingly at random. Ignores defense. In the Morning Star, now exclusive to Terra and Celeste, is a powerful weapon in Brave New World, in most part due to the fact that it ignores defense. As both girls lack an offensive secondary skill, the Morning Star is one of their few options and consistent damage output. Why did I say more? There was no more there. Morning Star, maybe? Furthermore, as mentioned above, in Morphology, all defense-ignoring attacks respect damage multipliers in Brave New World. Aside from Morph, the only other effect that change has is that defense-ignoring weapons are now boosted by the Berserk status, where previously they weren't. Note, they're actually an exception dice since Final Fantasy VI was coded by monkeys. Check my dubs. Got them. Speaking of dice, the way that they were designed in the original game meant that the regular kind, 2 dice, were garbage, while the fixed variety, 3 dice, were absolute tits. Aside from the obvious addition of a third multiplier to increase the damage output, the first 2 dice, i.e. the only 2 in the standard set, were weighed towards lower results, while the third die was ironically the only one to roll fairly. To top it all off, rolling triples and the fixed dice would multiply the final damage by the value rolled, easily hitting the damage cap for 4s and higher. This bonus now applies to rolling doubles with regular dice, and all 3 dice are now weighed to roll properly. Also, dice no longer do 50% more damage with Berserk. Anima weapon. Due to the low overhaul levels that everyone will achieve in this mod, the special damage formula used by the Atma weapon ends up nerfing the ever-loving shit out of it, since it assumes the baseline level of 64. To remedy the problem, its formula has been gutted. Old Atma weapon formula, math. New Atma weapon formula, math. Random spellcasts. In odds of a random spellcast that are 1 in 4 under normal circumstances, but certain pieces of equipment in Brave New World will double those odds to 1.5, including the Relic, which enables jump as well as all rods. Speaking of rods, MP for crits. Weapons that consume MP for automatic critical hits now cost an amount equal to 1/2 of the user's level rather than 12.9. This is important primarily because the auto crits are now a standard feature on rods to take advantage of an oddity in the game's code. No, really an oddity in the game's code that causes random spellcasts from them to also do critical damage, something that spells ordinarily cannot do. Combined with the above-mentioned feature that doubles the odds of random spellcasts occurring, this allows rods to function as viable weapons for magically inclined characters. Sea Realm, Strago, Terra. A major caveat to the above, however, is that the random spellcast damage is affected by Row, and 3/4 of the Brave New World's rod users die in the Gentle Breeze. This can be bypassed with the jump command, and random spellcast damage will receive the 50% damage boost from jumping. But the downside is that jump also disables critical hits, and critical hits have a higher damage boost 100% than jumping than rod does. Jump only provides the same damage boost as the critical hit when you do it with a spear. Smart. An astute reader may recognize the above bonuses as damage multipliers, and no doubt many of you are thinking, judging by the number of times I get asked this, that Berserk would be the perfect way to jack up your rod's user damage, except it's not. Despite the fact that random spellcasts benefit from every other damage multiplier, MP-fueled criticals, jump, morph, Berserk does not affect random spellcasts. Blame Squaresoft. I blame you, Squaresoft. Spoil the rod. Speaking of poor coding practices, using a rod or shield as an item in the original game would cause the resulting spell to deal massive damage because the item ignores all damage modifiers, specifically magic defense. This has been fixed so that spells cast from the rods used as items will do the same damage that they would had the character cast it normally. Also, the 3 basic elemental rods, fire, ice, and thunder, are now breakable. This is also treated as somewhat of a hidden feature in the game. A feature that it never explicitly mentioned either in the print me or the in-game. Quarter and Doom crits. Because the random spellcasts on the Quarterstaff and Doomstick don't do regular damage, they are not affected by the bugs/features mentioned above. This hack allows Quarter to affect all enemies when randomly cast from an MP-fueled critical hit. It would normally only affect the target of the attack, while the Doomstick would instead cast X-Zone rather than Doom on a group of enemies under the same circumstances. Apocaluminum crits. Okay. Conversely to the above, the Holy and Flare spells are hard-coded not to deal critical damage when randomly cast from the Illumina or Apocalypse. This is to prevent them from being massively overpowered. Always load MP. The game now always loads characters' MP at the start of the battle, even if the magic command is not present. This allows Gogo to use his MP for rod attacks without needing magic or lore set as a command. This also has an unintended side effect of doing the same for Medin as the rod-wielding Moogles in the opening battle to save terror from the guards, although none of them possess enough MP for more than one hit. We're still at it. Can't stop, won't stop. Always load MP. The game now always loads characters' MP at the start of the battle, even if the magic command is not present. This allows Gogo to use his MP for rod attacks without needing magic. I read this. Always have MP. Finally, weapons that consume MP for critical hits now respect the 1/2 MP cost property on the Gem Box Soul Box. X-Fight effect. The Offering effect is now set to make Fight a ×2 targetable attack with a 25% damage penalty instead of the ×4 untargetable attack with a 50% penalty. Although it remains distinct from just dual wielding in that the second attack will pick a new target if the first one kills what it hits, the X-Fight appears in Brave New World on a relic exclusive to Setzer, a shadow exclusive weapon, and on all brushes. As with Vanilla, Setzer's dice with the random wind attacks from the Kazakiri Matsunokami are exempt from the damage penalty, as are random spellcasts, Sakura. Finally, the new X-Fight also lacks several little-known properties of the original. It is not unavoidable, and it no longer disables critical hits or random spellcasts. And it will no longer bypass cover. This is part of the Psybaby Smart Cover hack, and is basically a bug fix for the Love Token effect. Double Jump, similar to above, the ability for Jump to strike more than once is now attached to a special helmet instead of a relic, and offers a 1 in 4 chance of a second hit instead of varying odds up to 4. Although, unlike X-Fight, the second jump always selects a target at random. Magic bonus fixes. The 25% magical damage, the plus 25% magical damage relic property had several odd effects in the original game, only one of which that it could be stacked despite the fact that its physical counterpart couldn't. Seemed to be intentional. It was being applied to periodic damage, i.e. sap poison ticks, even allowing them to go over the 8-bit cap, and was not being applied to curative magic, which, to be fair, may or may not have been intended. In any case, all of the above-mentioned issues have been fixed, and the equipment that offers plus 25% bonuses now use the word output instead of damage to indicate that the bonus also applies to curative abilities. Good to know. While it won't affect those with a set output such as Sabin's Mantra and Chakara abilities or blitzes, it will affect things such as Edgar's Defibrillator and Mana Battery tools or the Harvester or Sunbath Rage / Dance Steps. Golem fixes. The durability of Golem's effect is now based on the maximum HP of its caster rather than current, so that you needn't worry about being at full health to summon it. Conversely, Golem shares Interceptor's activation check, a 50% chance of blocking before regular evasion is considered. It also shares the issue of when picking randomly from a pool of all available evasion animations, instead of always using the correct one, which invisibly prolongs the wall's lifespan since it won't take any damage if the wrong animation is called. As with Interceptor, Golem now always uses the right animation. Palador fixes. Palador had some pretty serious problems in the original game, least of all being that it was bugged to hell and back, and mostly egregious. I know this word, I just can't say it as I'm looking. Erogenously, I'm not going to try it. Words. The fact that using it was a good way to get yourself killed, since the first character to land would just get pounded while waiting for their allies to come back down. Palador is changed in several ways here. The hidden status is now properly set on all jumpers, thus fixing bugs with being targeted in midair. Characters no longer disappear when Palador misses, i.e. fails to miss target them. Characters now all land in quick succession instead of staggered out, and ATB is preserved upon landing rather than being reset. Note that it will still increment while they are airborne. Gao Explode. Given the much lower XP totals of player characters in Brave New World, it's generally a losing proposition for the squishiest amongst them to commit Sudoku in order to do piddly damage at best. Thus, Exploder now deals 250% of the user's current HP in damage whenever it's used by a member of your party, either via the bomb rage or through sketch. Life hack. In the original game, the life spell had the exact same effect as the Tuft of Phoenix Down. Both would revive a falling ally to 1/8 of their maximum HP. We thought it'd be stupid that a cheap and freely available that was functionally identical to a resource-consuming spell, hence why the remedy spell now also restores HP in addition to its normal effects. As for the life spell, its fractional nature made it trickier to work with. Any value that would make it useful in the early game would render it strong enough to step on Life 2's toes in the later game. Thus, it was decided for it to revive allies to a semi-static value, a random number between 250 and 500. This makes it an extremely powerful revival tool in the early game when it can almost function as a full heal from the dead, but its usefulness gradually diminishes as you progress and it becomes less able to bring a newly revived character out of OKO territory. Revive and heal! In the original code, any command that could be made to target either living or dead targets, but now they're both, the Kieran Summon 777 slot, Spin, and Heal Force can now both heal living allies and revive dead ones. Phoenix, fractional items, Phoenix Down, conversely, is no longer ever able to bring a character to safety as it's now restored them to only 1 HP. This is a less significant nerf than most players realize, since maximum HP values required for 1/8 of it to absorb even a single enemy attacker quite high. There do now exist Phoenix tiers, which will restore 75% of the character's max HP, but they're quite obviously rare and in short supply. On the flip side of the above, the inability of curative items to heal a set amount of HP, MP greater than 8 bits, 255, lead them, at least the ones that restored HP, to being useless damn near right out the gate. Tonics and potions thus restore 1/2 and 1/4 of a character's maximum HP, respectively, allowing them to remain useful throughout the game without being overpowered early on. Although the latter is now quite expensive, Ethers follow suit with potions, while the rare X potions and X Ethers are now more useful by virtue of targeting the entire party. SOS Reset. Relics, which grant statuses when the rare reaches critical health, now reset on death of the user instead of only going off once per battle. This allows them to reliably trigger when a dead character is revived with a Phoenix Down. The life spell is too powerful to do so. Ribbon blocks stop. As part of being Brave New World's general focus on cinema as a primary means of avoiding status effects, there's no longer a relic that blocks all of them. The ribbon now only guards against stop, petrify, instant death, including zombie. And that first one is most notable since the game's code originally did not allow for any equipment to block stop. Sap slow immunity. Similarly, it's also impossible for equipment to offer protection from the slow status while it can block sap. It will also block the regen status because whoever coded this nightmare was on crack. Fair. With this in mind, Brave New World instead offers immunity to these statuses by means of equipment that inherently grants their counterparts haste and regen, respectively. The enemy design follows suit, with immunity to sap slow being non-existent outside the inherent regen and haste. Reflect timer. The reflect status now behaves like the image, also known as blink, status by having a 1 in 3 chance of wearing off after each time it's activated, rather than wearing off after a set amount of time. This allows it to function more effectively as a defensive status, since you won't wear off without protecting you at least once or when you least expect it to. Image nerf. In the original game, Image has a 1 in 4 chance of being broken whenever it blocks a physical attack. As with Reflect, those odds are now 1 in 3. New status display. This is a collection of hacks that greatly improve how the game conveys the presence of status effects on player characters. Color wheel. In the original game, six different status effects were represented by a colored aura glowing on the affected character. The issue is that only a single aura could be shown at a time, leading to obvious problems with figuring out which characters had which statuses. In Brave New World, only the safe and shell and reflect statuses are reflected with an aura, and those auras now cycle to show more of them at once. Love it. ATB stoplight. The haste, slow, and stop statuses on other hand can now be seen on a character's ATB bar, but rather than maintaining their vanilla colors, red for haste seems somewhat backwards. We instead opted for the universally recognized traffic colors: green for haste, yellow for slow, red for stop. I noticed that, and I appreciate that. There's no need for cycling, as with the above, since none of these statuses can functionally coexist. Targeting panel. When choosing a friendly target or an item or spell in battle, the panel which appears to display any status effects present on each character. Similar to the problem with auras, only one status could be displayed here at a time, and the order in which the 25 possible results were prioritized was questionable at best. This panel now displays only the presence of the re-rise and regen sap statuses, and they can be shown concurrently. Scan improvements. Seeing as a scan spell tells you almost nothing that isn't freely available in the print me, it's now a free action outside of its 1 MP cost. It also cannot trigger enemy counterattacks. Status scan. In the original game, scan showed enemy HP, MP, and the elemental weakness. Here, it only shows elemental weaknesses useful for wall change bosses, and status effects useful for when you can't remember if you cast slow on a boss. And on the subject of setting statuses on enemies, informative miss. Yes, Bropedo let me know about this in one of the streams. Very proud of him. He should be proud of himself. Whenever an attack which sets a negative status, either in addition to dealing damage or not, fails to set that status on its target, it will display one of two failure messages. Fail. Status was resisted by stamina, or null. Target is immune to the status. I love that. I love that. I love that. If the target already has a status, then no message is shown. ATB HP toggle. Holding the select button in battle will now toggle between whichever the ATB and max HP is set as default in the config menu and the other of the two. This is particularly important since, as mentioned above, the presence of the all-speed base statuses are now conveyed via the ATB bar. As a side effect of this hack, select is no longer remapped to the R button in battle and thus cannot be used to select multiple targets. Compact spell list. The in-battle magic menu for each character is now condensed to remove the empty spaces that previously existed due to the nature of how the game's code dynamically generated its list of known spells. Quality of life. Spell dots. When any white, black, or gray spell is cast in battle, its colored dot will now be properly displayed alongside its name. This is meant as more than a mere visual tweak. Brave New World standardizes the Runic skill to only work on regular magic, and no other enemy skills aside from the ones available as lures cost MP. Thus, the presence of a colored dot in an enemy attack is a clue to the player as to how it can be prevented. MP, HP, text color. Text colorization in battle will now change to indicate MP damage, red, or healing, blue. A side effect of this patch is that it also alters the color of the reflect shield when attacks are bounced off of it, due to the fact that the MP healing is piggybacking off of the same palette as reflect uses. This also means that the MP healing font is susceptible to the same little known bug as reflect, wherein the summoning gets messed up for the duration of any fight in which Crusader is summoned. Original graphics restores the following sprites to their original uncensored versions, which means Booba, Siren, Goddess with the butt, Chardanook, Critic, Barbie, Madame, Darling. Note that most of these have been renamed. This hack is omitted from the clean version of Brave New World. Probably the one I have. Triatch GFX fix. This fixes a minor graphical bug with the Triatch summon animation that causes the sprite to be missing a small portion of its tail. Menu improvements. Now we're going to some UI stuff. This is a collection of hacks that improve the user interface of the main menu system in various ways. Clean status screen. The character status screen has been completely redesigned to utilize the previously blank space and include EL information alongside just regular level information. Some attributes have been also renamed for clarity. Bat power is attack, magic power is magic, evade percent is evade, magic block is magic evade, magic defense is magic defense. Equipment menu overhaul. I tried to order these hacks in a way that made sense, but there's just so much. Yes, yes. I've never spoke this much in my entire life. I feel it's great practice. I can tell when my reading gets ahead of my talking, and I stumble over words, and then I find some zen moments where I actually find my rhythm. It is a lot, but I love it. I only do big things, so this is perfect. Back to it. Equip menu overhaul. The equip screen has been redesigned to include relics, eliminating the need for a separate equip screen for them. An equipment description so that you don't need to exit the inventory screen to view them. Thank you. Review screen. Replacing the relic option in the main menu is a shortcut to a little known feature of the original game, which will display an overview of the party's loadout thanks to gray shadows. This screen has been edited to also show equipped espers since they now function like equipment. Appreciate that. Overlay and MP cost. This removes the small overlay which identifies the skill submenus, i.e. Esper spells Bushido. Because it was unnecessary and obscured the lower right portion of the information panel above it, the mod makes use of this real estate, whereas vanilla did not. The only useful piece of information that appeared in this overlay was the MP cost of a chosen spell. Spell costs are now visible by default in the main menu panel. I say by default because the other little-known feature of the original game is that you can press Y in the spell menu to toggle MP costs in the main menu. What's shown by default is the spell percentage learn, which isn't exactly useful / relevant information in Brave New World. Rage and dance moves. Rage now displays their primary and secondary attack in the skill menu, while dances now display all 4 moves. For information about the attacks themselves or the properties of the enemies for other effects of their rages, please consult the print name. Alphabetical rage. Furthermore, rages are now sorted alphabetically in the rage list rather than by the order in the enemy index assassin. Thank goodness. The rage list in the skills submenu is now condensed to display only the first 64 slots, the number of rages available in Brave New World, instead of all 256. Note, lures have also received the same treatment as above, but not to ASM hack. They've just been rearranged in the spell index. Blitz screen. Blitz names are now displayed in the menu instead of just the inputs. Note, all the inputs are the same as vanilla except for Bum Rush. Though it would be nice to have the inputs. Not in the menu itself, but in the actual game, in the actual battle screen. Unequipium. This fixes a bug wherein characters' max HP and MP values would not update after removing equipment that boosted until they were in active party, leading to incorrect values being shown on the party creation screen. Didn't know I need it? Glad I have it. Inventory sorting. Using the arrange command in the inventory now sorts item types in a manner that actually makes some sense. Old order, dagger, sword, spear, katana, rod, brush, throwing star, other weapon, casino weapon, claw, shield, helmet, armor, tool, ninja scroll, relic, new order, tool, throwing star, ninja scroll, dagger, sword, spear, claw, katana, casino weapon, rod, brush, other weapon, shield, helmet, armor, relic. No inventory index. This removes the unique item counter from the bottom right of the info panel in the inventory screen. Since it serves virtually no purpose in Brave New World, collecting 255 items is impossible, and there aren't even that many items in Brave New World to begin with, and this was causing text overlap. Shop preview. Because weapons and armor are now so much more than their primary stats, Brave New World removes the arrows which appear in shops comparing their wares to what you already have on, as well as the display on the purchase confirmation screen showing battle power, weapons, or defense armor. Instead, you can now hold Y while shopping to view full stats for whatever item you have selected, similar to the extend info screen you can see by double-clicking any piece of equipment in your inventory and then pressing left or right to switch between views. Hold up. All right, now this is new to me. Similar to the extend info screen, you can see by double-clicking any piece of equipment in your inventory. Okay. I didn't know that. Now I know. I'm gonna check that out next time I'm in the game. No optimize, because the optimize command only considers raw defense battle power. We just got done establishing why that's a poor measurement of the usefulness of equipment. It's no longer an option on the equipment menu. I do miss it though. Optimized Fix. The only instances in Brave New World where the optimized code is still used are when Edgar and Terra are force equipped when they rejoin you immediately prior to boss battles. And we utilize an external patch to prevent it from doing stuff like making Edgar wear a drill as a hat or make him wear a suit of dried meat. Also, it no longer ignores the Blood Sword and Soul Saber. Rewards display. The Coliseum menu now displays a prize for any item wagered without having to commit the wager beforehand. Great. Love it. Note that the Coliseum has been completely reworked and standardized to make it more obvious, intuitive what items can be wagered to win fabulous prizes, and what will simply earn you a date with Mr. Chupon. Simply put, any item with no resale value is considered rare and can be bet at the Coliseum. Everything else is not rare and wins you literally nothing. Windows style. New Windows style. We'll added a new Windows style as the default one, with the old default style replacing the style 8, which was used only by a-holes and mental patients. Yes, the Chocobo background was kind of cringe. It is the single most obvious visual change in Brave New World and a good quick indicator of which version of Final Fantasy 7 or 6, someone is playing. B button dash. Obsolete sprint shoes by adding dash button B. This patch has been modified from the original version by Master Zed to disallow dashing at the following points in the game where dashing was originally disabled: the opening sequence, Magitech Raid or Narsh, any other time you've been wearing Magitech armor, the Save Terror sequence, the Moogle Battle, the Battle of Narsh, Celeste's Opera Solo, Daryl's Tomb, the Stair flashback sequence. This patch has also been further modified to replace the now useless optimized empty slot in which the config menu with the option to make running the default speed while holding B will make you walk at normal speed. Great quality of life update there. Save and restore. An important evolutionary turning point in the history of console RPGs was when the random encounter system that had been so ubiquitous in the genre since its inception started going the way of the dodo sometime in the late 90s. With good reason. Traditional game design generally presented them as little more than annoyances that consistently interrupt the flow of the game, which were tolerated by the sheer virtue of providing cash and experience points. And while random trash mobs will always have their place as something that to hit until you eventually get stronger and or richer, it was always our belief that the true purpose was to serve as a means of wearing the player down prior to a boss fight, which would then be that much more challenging. There was only one tiny problem. Given that the ability to save the game at any time is a feature of any software required to play this mod in the first place, it was decided to actively shift Brave New World's difficulty model away from save denial, which frankly died out with blast processing and slap bracelets. Can we throw pogs in there? Can we throw pogs in that list too? Can we also throw troll dolls and more towards inventory management with the following changes? Several save points have been added to key areas. Some save points are now also full recovery points, the red ones, I'm assuming. Tents and sleeping bags have been removed from the game. In short, recovery items are now more important since you just can't pop a tent before every boss fight, and random encounters are thus now able to serve their function, being a drain on your resources leading up to them. This isn't to say that random fights are difficult in their own right. However, players are just as likely to die at the hands of minor foes as they are to major ones, which has happened to me. And to that end, the time-honored advice of save early and often holds true, because game over, man. Death in battle now kicks you back to the menu screen instead of to your last save. This was done because while this would retain all experience gained, it would not retain any Esper stat boosts, and that bad. Hold on, let me read that again, because I need to know for sure. Death in battle now kicks you back to the menu screen instead of to your last save. This was done because while this would retain all experience gained, it would not retain any stats, Esper stats. So I do keep, let me ask a question. Does that mean that every time I died, I did keep the XP and Esper points? It's been a long read, and I'm getting woozy. But we press on. Can't lose our Shadow. Shadow won't randomly run off on you anymore at any point during Sabin scenario if you hire him collagen. He's also kind enough now to leave all of his stuff behind whenever an event forces him out of the party. Zozo unequipped. Speaking of Zozo specifically, the new event that will unequip Shadow as he hex off will also unequip everyone else not in the active party, so that you don't have to go back to Narsh and get any of your stuff back. Thank you. I appreciated that. Arvis unequipped. Further, Arvis is now acts as a unequipped guy following your Battle of Narsh, so that you don't have to make a party of bench warmers just so that you can take off all of their gear. Thank you. I appreciate that. No, I'm just explaining why we removed the soft deaths. Okay, fair. Scenario unequipped. Thank you for the answer. Finally, a unequipped guy has been added to the scenario select screen so that unequipping everybody at the end of each one, where the inability to do so in Locke's case, is no longer a consideration in what order to finish them in. As their scenario goes directly into combat as it begins, Terra and Edgar will be force optimized to avoid them not having anything early on. Great. I appreciated that. That was the first thing I thought of with the unequip everybody. MP Party Restore. The Choose a Party screen now restores the MP of all characters to max instead of just HP. This is done primarily to act as a full party heal prior to the Battle of Narsh, although it's also a good convenience hack. Not only does it remove the need to visit an inn after swapping out your team, but it also affects picking a character to fight in the Coliseum. Thank you. Quality of life. Many other quality of life changes have been made to various stages of the game, including the Phantom Train, the Battle of Narsh, Cyan's Dream, Ancient Castle, Ebbets Rock, Fanatic's Tower, and more. These edits are detailed in the Unlock Me archive, to which the password will be revealed after completion of the game. What? You mean to tell me that after I clear the game, I get a password that I can then... Okay. Alright. Now that makes me want to beat the game. Oh my goodness. Interesting. The game keeps surprising me, y'all. The game keeps on surprising me. I got sidetracked off of this huge quality of life thing I didn't even know about. I'd like to extend a special thanks to Madsior, Guy Natak, and Deschan, who also came by in the chat a couple of times for their parts in them, as well as a extra special thanks to Jackamus for, well, you'll see. Interesting. Leaving them wanting more. Alright, Part 5. Bugs and known issues. Emulator-specific bugs during certain battles, most notably during cranes. The menu cursor will become difficult to see or disappear entirely. This is an issue specific to the very outdated as of 2020 ZSNES emulator. Good thing I don't use that, I don't think. Also, ZSNES, off-screen characters appearing layered over HUD during in-battle cutscenes. I haven't seen that. Again, ZSNES, noticing a pattern here. Chad R. Nook's transition animation is really messed up. Using the SNES 9X Next, aka SNES X9 2010 core with RetroArch may cause the battle interface to randomly flash whenever an action is about to take place. Fixed by switching to standard SNES 9X. That's the one I'm using. Note, these bugs are not specific to Brave New World and will also appear in Vanilla FF6. Unfixed bugs from Vanilla. Here we go. Renaming your characters, especially those with short names like Cyan, Gao, or Mog, can result in weird formatting in dialogue boxes. The ones that appear during battle cutscenes are notable offenders since they don't wrap normally and can result in text overrunning the dialogue window. Interesting. Treasure chests containing key items such as the one that Ebbets Rock will close if you go into the menu screen and will be empty if you attempt to reopen them. Interesting. The game sometimes does not properly update a character's current MP value to disallow them from casting spells that they can't afford, which will then fail if you attempt to do so. This seems to occur most often with weapons that consume MP for critical hits. If a character dies while attempting to summon an Esper, that Esper will still be flagged as having been summoned when the appropriate update routine, similar to the above, is called. Interesting. The 255th named ability to be used in a single battle will cause minor graphical errors in the text area. Although not specific to Brave New World, it is much more likely to be seen here. Foes with the imp status will retain the sprite if cured by anything other than the imp spell. Funny. As mentioned earlier, Crusader will recolor the Reflect Shield for the remainder of the battle. Similar to above, the Quasar attack will screw with the Storm spell animation. You still get a free buckler and boomerang when, spoiler, Brave New World specific bugs. Here we go. The new shop preview feature causes notable lag and returns to wrong null values for tools. It is possible but rare for both enemies and player characters to counter a counterattack. Interesting. The Rich Man's House is Salfagara randomly sticks your character in the face after stepping on certain event tiles, locking the D-pad until any of the face buttons are pressed. When the quarterstaff multi-targets its spell proc on an MP fueled auto crit, it will target all enemies, including ones who are already dead, due to the way that the targeting is hard-coded. The Berserk status is cleared by the Zombie status and can't be reapplied if the character is getting Berserked inherently from the Hyper Risk. Technically, this is a vanilla bug, but the only thing that originally set the auto Berserk was the Cursed Shield. I remember that. Death animations for some enemies under certain conditions will play out individually instead of simultaneously. If more than one of them are killed by the same attack, I've experienced this before. In the first battle with Ultros ends with Edgar in the air. Jump is available much earlier in the Brave New World than it is in Vanilla. The following cutscene will play out without him. One of the new save points we added has the wrong palette. We have no idea why. And this little gem YouTube link. Version history. Here we go. Version 2.0, that's the one I'm on, January 1st, 2020. Repurposed the auction house in Jador as an advanced beginner school, which I appreciate. This allows the one in Narsh to focus on general changes without overwhelming players with the advanced details that are unlikely to be retained until they become relevant. Smart. I remember hearing this in the chat. Completely rewrote enemy AI with a heavy focus on more predictable behavior and random encounters that should be easier to exploit and more interesting dynamic boss battles, which I have experienced. Enemies now usually use completely different attacks when their AI changes rather than just being more likely to use their stronger attacks, making their behavior easier to figure out. Random foes are somewhat weaker now than before, doing less damage per attack than being less aggressive under normal circumstances, but become much more threatening when triggered. Melee attacks, magic attacks, etc. Certain enemies can now counter melee physical row-respecting attacks rather than in previous versions where counterattacks were specific to the command used. Enemies disabled by status effects can no longer counterattack on death. Some foes can now be disabled or otherwise affected by being hit with an elemental weakness. Special thanks to Massacre Sire, first modification for the F2 AI optcode. Lower the HP of many enemies and several bosses who were deemed to have more than necessary. Notable nerfs include Tentacles, Chesticle, Hideon, Hydon, Inferno. The scripting error had previously caused them to have 40,000 more HP than intended. Guardian in the final battles, Kefka. Added a minimum number of steps between battles, slightly lowering the overall rate. Increased the pace of combat by doubling ATB fill speed during empty downtime. Running from battle is no longer substantially more difficult than it is in vanilla. I appreciate that. Non-standard random encounters backside pincer attacks are more likely, but your party is able to react faster to them, and physical damage is no longer doubled from behind. The defend and row commands now only consume half a turn. We've gone over that before. Can now swap out weapons and shields in combat, but cast half a turn per hand. Went over that. When swapping equipment in battle or leaving the rage status, only previously inherent statuses are now stripped instead of all of them. Maximum HP MP from equipment is now also updated. Green cherries will now cancel any action that the target has queued. Excuse me. Greatly improved how the game handles resistance to multi-elemental attacks. Immunity to multi-level attacks now requires immunity to both elements. Damage is now half if only if one element is immune and the weakness to the other is normal damage. We went over this before. Resistance half damage to only one element has the same effect as immunity to only one. Absorption of either element will trump all else, even if a weakness to another. Mixing weaknesses and resistance to the same element on the character follows the above rules, except that only resistance is canceled by a weakness. Immunity or higher to override it. Mug no longer ignores special weapon effects, but will attack. But the attack will now miss if the steal fails. We've gone over all this. Excuse me. We have gone through all this. Hold on. Let me just lightly go over all this while I'm not just blowing past it. Redesign the Earth and Dark, aka poison icons, extended equipment descriptions, remove the unique item counter at the bottom right of the info panel inventory screen. Yep, we went over that before. Characters who join later in the world of spoiler are now re-averaged to higher levels. We ran over that. Tweak the base stats for several characters, notably buffs. Gao's attack buff effectively acts as a starting weapon. The Bone Club still maxes him out, but the jump is now somewhat less drastic. Buffs to Gao Vigor and Magic help balance him later on, combined with several rage edits. These changes keep his physical and magical damage more even throughout the game, instead of later dominating the early half and the former overtaking it when you get the Bone Club. Everyone else's attacks was adjusted mostly for aesthetic reasons. Only Sabin, Cyan, Edgar see any kind of noteworthy gain. Significantly raised Mog's base HP and slightly raised Sabin's and Cyan's. Lower Cyan's magic since its only practical use is on cure spells, which he isn't meant to be very good at. Note that the Kazikiri and the Mutsuno Kami wind attacks are now stamina based, raised lock stamina. Curing animal weapons is apparently a thing now. Umaro's changes are all inconsequential. The Bone Club still maxes out his attack. A speed buff to one of his special relics offsets his speed nerf, and he doesn't use magic at all. Edited the Vigor stamina damage variance reduction for him to have a better effect on higher values. More specifically, it no longer provides diminishing returns past 90. The effect of the change is present at all values, but the results are significant below 90. Updated the regen formula to rely more heavily on character stamina than on their maximum HP. In short, the characters with low HP and high stamina, i.e. certain Strago realm builds, can now get much higher regen ticks, while someone like 25 Terato Sabin now gets lower ticks. Reverted the formula for poison damage to vanilla settings for player characters, while enemies now take substantially more damage from it. In vanilla, each poison tick would increment the value of the original tick. Previous versions of Brave New World half this value for all combat participants, whereas poison damage on enemies now doubles with each successful tick. We've gone over this. Simplified how evasion works for magic attacks rather than a hit rate. The print me now just lists the relevant evasion stats, stamina or evade for attacks that can be avoided. The accuracy of magical attacks is now 101%. Targets evade math. So any avoidable attack that previously had a hit rate of 120, the basic element spells, is now less accurate. Generally speaking, I tried to make it so that only attacks that are avoidable are the ones that look like they might be. So Storm, Flare, Meteor are back to being unblockable. Remember that enemies don't have magic evasion. Only your party can dodge magical attacks. The 101 accuracy is to eliminate the 1% possibility of evading such attacks. Change who learns spells and when against mostly the gray ones. Life to Kirin was on Ramu. Celeste learns it now at level 18. Demi to Ramu was on Kirin, and Crusader was on Alexander. See below. Quarter to Crusader was on Alexander. See below. Rasp to Siren was on Maduin. Berserk to Siren was on Fenner. Sleep to Stray, which was supposed to be there already instead of Mute. Mute to Maduin was on Siren Stray. Warp to Zone Seek, which is still on Fenner. Stop to Carbuncle, which was on Soul Seek. Zone Seek, Slow to Shiva Golem was on Carbuncle. Terra learned Slow later. She no longer has it for the first Ultros fight. Celeste learns to spell at level 15, might be useful against number 24. Swap the locations of Crusader and Alexander with the later now behind the Cache Gate instead of the former old Boss Gate. Also swap their users. Esper level equipment bonuses and move Demi-Quarter to Crusader. All that's really changing here is that Cyan learns Mertron instead of Holy, and Celeste gets earlier, easier access to Holy. And the Esper level equip bonuses that were previously on Crusader. Raise Zone Seek's EL bonus to Magic +1 / Magic +20. MP was only +15 before. Swap the equip bonuses on Carbuncle, now Auto Regen, and Starlet, now +25 MP. Adjusted the MP costs of many spells, summons, and lures. Notably, there is now a much bigger price gap between 2 water lures, and Blowfish no longer has an MP cost. Numbers not listed. All changes of 5 MP or less. Bad Breath no longer accepts Sap. Blaze and Raise still do. Blaze is now Fire Wind Elemental, was just Fire. Raise is weaker, Power 90 to 75, and now Fire Wind Elemental was Fire Dark. See below. Rebranded the Poison element as Dark and reworked its line of spells to be more useful. Sap renamed from Poison is weaker, -6 power, now sets Sap instead of Poison. Poison, i.e. Bio, costs more, see above, is stronger, +6 power, and always sets Poison. Dark costs more, see above, but is much stronger. Per the above, Mertron is now a Fire Dark spell instead of Fire Wind. Makes sense. Break and Quake are now both slightly, exactly 1 out of 9 each, stronger but more expensive. Mute is no longer multi-target, but is more effective than before due to resistance being much less common and enemies using spells more frequently. Scan is now a free action, but can no longer trigger enemy counterattacks. Edited several Esper summons, notably buffs to Maduin, Bismarck, and Kieran is now a full party revive. Kieran now both revives fallen allies and heals live ones instead of setting regen. Stray, now a stamina-based heal that also sets regen. Siren now respects stamina instead of never missing. Guess they never miss. Shote now has a lower hit rate in addition to respecting stamina. Maduin, power 90 was 60, still ignores defense. Bismarck, power 120 was 90. Major changes to Blitz. Stamina options are stronger, but only physical blitzes now ignore defense. Mantra, formula edited to rely less on Sabin's current HP and much more on stamina. Aurabolt is stronger and learned much earlier, but no longer ignores defense or row. Sonic Boom is stronger and now stamina based, but no longer ignores defense. Fire Dance is stronger, 40 to 60, and is now learned later. Suplex now sets stop instead of slow, as Sabin can now learn slow. Several Bushido changes. Stamina-ish options are weaker, and only Dispatch Dragon now ignores defense. Tempest is now stronger on average. No longer ignores defense. Dragon is slightly weaker, so that Stamina Scion does not outdamage Vigor Scion in the mid-game. Also, lowered Petrify odds to half. Eclipse is now magic-based, so that it scales the same for all builds and doesn't compete for damage with the now stamina-based wind swords. Empower no longer ignores row and is weaker. While still mostly a full heal from the front row, is now noticeably weaker from the back. Cleave now respects both physical evasion and stamina, and was previously just stamina. Changes to or that affect rages, including giving Gao better healing rage soldier right out the gate and balancing endgame physical damage. Around 3 times damage instead of 4. Lots to go over here. Almost too much to go over. Edited several dance steps, all of which include rage attacks. Changed the 3 out of 16 step 1 Earth Blues to Wind Slash, as Earth Blues is primarily a boss dance. Cave-In was often a wasted turn. Rebalanced the main winning slot spins. Blackjack still the strongest against most foes. Solitaire is now the weakest since it also blinds your opponent. And Trifecta, 3 Chocobos is your sap setter. Blackjack no longer sets sap. Trifecta is stronger and Solitaire is weaker. The 777 slot spin now both revives falling allies and heals live ones, but its power is now slightly lower than losing a spin. This change was made to correct an animation bug where Setzer will not step back into the right position after his attack. Phoenix is now ignored by Bar for the same reason. Raise the power of all vigor-based tools. Auto crossbow, drill and chainsaw, all up to 180, 200, 255 respectively. Bioblaster is no longer for sale until after the Battle of Narsh. The Flash is weaker, 75 to 60, as the blind status is now more effective. The upgraded auto crossbow now has perfect accuracy, in addition to being 50% stronger. Set Ninja Stars to maximum ultimate power, were previously 240. Question Mark is now slightly weaker on average, but ignores defense. Desperation attacks no longer set slow, they still set sap. Elixirs now remove most bad statuses as a remedy would. Edited the wares of most shops, pushing back the availability of some items, making others available sooner, and most notably fixing instances of items becoming unavailable at certain points. Bandanas are now for sale in South Figaro per the removal of plumed hats. Bioblaster is now sold at Figaro Castle after the Battle of Narsh. The Kusarigama, now a weapon for shadows, see below, is sold at Jador. The Hyper Wrist and Ichimanji, i.e. Nodachi, now appear for sale later. Zen and Marenda. Words. Mystery Veil, Sprint Shoes, and Gale Hailpins now appear for sale sooner. Zen and Albrook. Narsh now sells all elemental swords after IMTRF. Okay, yeah. The Magitech factory, I think. Yeah. I had this acronym explained to me before, and I'm an idiot. Light robes are now for sale at Zen instead of Nikea. They're also cheaper. Dark Hood's gear now unavailable until you get the Falcon. Many items previously no longer sold in the world of Spoiler now are at Albrook, Nikea, and Collagen. Figaro Castle now sells warp whistles in the world of Spoilers. Renamed several pieces of equipment. Also swapped the names of Dali and Monet brushes. We're creeping down to the last 8 minutes of this stream. I'm going to call it after that. I have to put in some work at my graphic design gig for a moment, and that takes priority. I can return to this, however. Rename several pieces of equipment. Also swap the names of the Dali and Monet brushes. Rune Blade was Rune Edge. Motive. I removed the only other sword named Blade. I love these. I love these descriptions. Ichimonuchi was Nodachi. Motive. Mishrak kept bugging me about it. Viper Darts was Doom Darts. Motive. They no longer trigger instant death. Dark Cal was Dark Hood. Consistency other than Hood is a Realm Gal only. Storm Belt was Rage Belt. Avoids confusion with Gouge Rage ability. Smart. Quartz Charm was Death Ward. It no longer blocks instant death. Smart. Bracelet was Star Ring. Motive too many relics or rings. Talisman was Jewel Ring. Where are we? Are a bunch of hobbits? Fairy Charm. Fairy Ring. Seriously. That's too much bling. Spirit Stone was Spirit Ring. Even Mr. T thinks y'all need to chill out. I love it. I love it. I love it. Dali Brush. Monet Brush. Seem more thematically appropriate. Appreciate that. Remove several pieces of equipment. Omega Weapon was functionally and graphically identical to Atoma Weapon. Stormblade was redundant with the Elect Sword as the mechanical foes were weak versus both. Card Setzer now just begins with darts. Poison Rod was just kind of shitty. Plumed Hat effectively replaced by Bandana Green Beret. Headband effectively replaced by the bandana. Tiara effectively replaced the mystery veil. Silk Robe. Realm just shows. We're not going to say that. Rework the stat boots on elemental blades and shields to provide all magic bonuses. Flame Tongue. Ice Brand. Elect Braid. Flame Guard. Thunder Guard. Scimitar and Falchion now enable counterattacks to encourage pairing them with other weapons. I was told that Celeste and Terra will be great with scimitars. The Demon's Bane no longer deals holy damage so that it doesn't beat out the Avenger versus Undead foes. I love Demon's Bane, by the way. Slightly lowered the battle power of and vigor boost on the Valiants. Earlier claws are now available sooner, and the later ones are stronger. Spirit Claws can now be bought. Poison Claws can now be bought. Frost Gore, slightly stronger. Stormfang, much stronger. Change the random spellcast on Spirit Claw, Stop Slow, and Frost Gore, Doom Ice. Spirit Claws now allow Sabin to set slow on Soul Train since Suplex no longer does so. Overhaul the magical katanas. Stat boosts are now plus speed plus stamina. Hold on a second. I just heard the little word thing go off. I just heard something. Let me just jump over here real quick. Oh my god, we got another follower. We're one step closer to the 30 goal. Thank you, Fathleo23. Let me know if I said your name right. Let me try it again. Fathleo23. Fathleo23. You gotta let me know if that's right. Cause I butcher names. I butcher spellings. I'm the worst. And you're following me, so I appreciate that. I appreciate you. We're just about wrapping up in about 4 minutes. I gotta go and do some graphic design work real quick, but that's not gonna stop me. I'm gonna have a delicious keto dinner tonight and then spend the rest of the night with my hand on the butt. So it's gonna be a good night. Let's power through this as much as we can real quick. Change to random spellcast. We talked about that. Overhaul magical katanas. Did that. Hanzo. Stamina plus 2 was vigor. Ichimonuchi. See, I told you I butchered these names. It's like low. Fadlo. Thank you. Fadlo23. I appreciate that. Look, I'm gonna be honest with you. I'm deaf in one ear. I have a speech impediment. It's a legit thing. I'm not working you, brother. This is true. So I appreciate you helping me out with that. Fadlo23. I appreciate your follow. I appreciate you helping me out with the pronunciations. And now watch me. Now listen to me butcher some more. Now it has the Zantetsuken's insta-kill crit effect. Kaze Kiri. Speed plus 5. Stamina plus 5. Was vigor and magic. Wind attack is now stamina base power 60. Matsun Okami. Plus 7 speed, plus 7 stamina was vigor and magic. Wind attack is now stamina base power 120. Rework the stat boots on Shadow's ninja daggers to complement the above mentioned katana blade changes. Sakura, speed plus 3, magic plus 5. Magic bonus was stamina. Kajanui, magic +7, was stamina. Orochi, +7, remove stamina 5. Added the strong versus flying foes property to the Kunai and Ninjato. Yikes. I apologize for all of that. The Kusarigama has been reworked into a Zozo-era anti-human ninja weapon that can also stop slow, overhauled Setzer's casino weapons, removed all stats boots, always hits, except for dice, and the ability to dual-wield darts in favor of making them better weapons. I love it. Darts, slightly weaker than before, -10 attack, but stronger than the cards were. Tarot now deals holy damage in addition to the Undead Slayer effect. Second to Cyan, Setzer is a undead killer. Viper Darts uses MP for critical hits rather than instant death, once again, on the same level as the Cyan. Dice now gets a doubles bonus and fair rolling odds. Thank you. Fixed dice. The first 2 dice now roll fairly instead of low. Rods are more expensive, especially Doomstick, and the only basic elemental ones can be broken. Fire Rod, Ice Rod, Thunder Rod, Quarterstaff, Doomstick, and Punisher can no longer be used as items in battle, the last 3. Larger rods, Quarterstaff and higher, now all possess physical evasion only, thus Doomstick gains evade and losses magical evade, while the Punisher just loses the latter. Lowered the attack on the Punisher 180 to 150 as it was too strong when dragooning. Added a new Coliseum exclusive weapon for Strago Realm that is basically a one-handed Mutsuno Kami. Brushes now hit twice to increase the likelihood of random spell casts. Lowered the attack to compensate for the extra damage. Also added magic evasion 10 to all brushes and reworked their stat boosts. Light brush attack to 60 was 100. Brunette brush was 80 is now 80 was 120. Dally brushes attack to 100 was 140. Ross brush, is that Bob Ross reference? Because if it is, I truly appreciate it. 10 out of 10 IGN. Love the Bob Ross reference. Attack to 120 was 160. It is. Thank you. Hold up. I don't check it out in some of my other streams, but I literally have. Okay, hold up. I got it right here. My man chilling with us right here. Keeping us chill, keeping us tranquilo. My man Bob Ross hanging out. He appreciates the reference too. It is now 9 o'clock, but damn it, I'm gonna keep going. Until this segment is over. At least I got to. Brush now randomly casts Reflex instead of Haste. Magic Bone, formerly a Hidden Thief exclusive weapon for Gal, can now be won at the Coliseum. Morningstar is stronger, attack 100-125, and is now usable only by Celeste and Terra. Chainsaw now cleaves on insta-kill procs, thus preventing counterattacks. Any anti-undead weapons now use the X-kill command. Animation, which also prevents counterattacks. Adjusted the prices of a lot of store-bought armor, the light armor, and many early game upgrades are all cheaper, while a few key items, namely the Oath Veil, are more expensive. There you go. You can pause the stream if you want to get the numbers there, or refer to the print name. Slightly adjusted the stats of several helmets and suits of armor, most notably a +10 magic defense increase for the Magnus Hat Circlet, and a +5 to physical defense for all heavy armor from gold onward. Thank you. Realm now comes equipped with the Memento Ring. It is no longer hidden. Strago no longer comes equipped with Magus Hat. The Royal Jacket no longer blocks fire damage. Removed the 25+% MP buff from the Minerva and added it to the Radiant Gown. Bandanas in the Mirage Vest can now be equipped by anyone instead of just light armor users. Umaro can now equip the Skull Cap. It's the only helmet he can use. It's fair. Gogo can no longer wear robes. He must wear hides or vests. Also fair. The Hero Shield now sets Inherent Sap instead of Condemned until the curse is lifted. I love that. I was wondering how you guys were going to tackle that. The shield deal. A certain piece of hidden armor has slightly less defense, but now has bolt wind damage. Vague. A certain piece of hidden armor. Reworked the coverage of status protection relics. Most notably, the ribbon now only blocks instant death. It is now the only relic to do so. Stop and petrify. Fairy Charm, Sleep with Berserk, White Cape, Amulet, Spirit Stone, Ribbon, Quartz. Relics, which grant statuses at critical health, now trigger again if the wearer dies. It is no longer possible to revive a character who dies while wearing a ghost ring. Nice. Raised the physical evasion of Sprint Shoes and the magical evasion of the Magic Cube. Lowered the defense of the Guard Ring and added Magic Defense, did the opposite for Wall Ring. Removed both evasion boosts from the back guard and raised both defense stats up to 20 from 10. Removed +7 magic bonus from the gem box and the +7 vigor boost from the soul box. Added stat boost to the Storm Belt +5 speed and Blizzard Orb +5 stamina. Also modified their in-game descriptions to be less cryptic about what they do, specifically their +25 damage properties. Yes. Per this, Umaro can no longer equip the Muscle Belt or Crystal Orb. Expected as much. Altered the wording of all +25% damage bonuses to clarify that they affect both damage and healing output. Moved the contents of many chests, including adding the dice to the World of Spoiler chests so that they are no longer missable, as well as the Viper Darts, formerly a Coliseum exclusive. Changed several enemy steals. Bosses now hold common thief exclusive items instead of rare items. Changed many traits at the Coliseum and replaced the more obnoxious opponents with easier ones. All rare consumables now trade directly down the Phoenix tiers or Ninja Stars. Force and Genji equipment is no longer interchangeable. Both now have their own trade loops. Sage Stones are now part of the Rogue Nirvana trade loop. You can now acquire 3 of them. It's no longer possible to acquire more than 1 skull cap. Royal Jacket, Snow Muffler. Ribbons now trade into the Agrius, Aegis, Shield, Mirage Vest, exchange words. Replaces the Quartz Charm. The Kagenyu trades back and forth with the new stamina-based weapon for Realm Strago. Modified the enemy encounter structure to make foes less difficult to find on the veldt. All missable World of Balance formations can now be found on the Triangle Island and the Grenade Forest near the veldt. Nice. The Leap command is now disabled if all rages in an enemy are already known. Going over that. Changed the names of many enemies thanks to Assassin and their special attacks. Also edited their attack animations to make them more closely match what they're supposed to be. Removed or changed many elemental resistances, weaknesses that felt unintuitive or made no sense. Thematics. Overhauled enemy status resistances, only the major ones, Sleep, Muddled, Berserk, Stop, Petrify, and Instant Death, are now commonly resisted while others are almost universally effective. As seen above, Stone status is now back to the original name, Petrify. Improved standardization of enemy stats, namely defense, both types, evasion, stamina, and speed. Foes with Inherent Safe Shell now always take 25% damage from attacks that respect defense, while all others will take 40 or 60. Inherent Haste is now always indicative of a faster foe with above average physical evasion. Foes who possess physical evasion now have the intended amount. Standard evasion is now 13, effectively 10% instead of 10, while hasted foes have 32 or 25 instead of 25. Similar to above, enemies now possess the correct amount of stamina. They previously had half of their intended value. HP divided by 512 rather than HP 526, capping at 16,392 HP instead of 8,196. Reworked enemy boss MP values. Fewer enemies have MP at all, but those who do now use it frequently. See mute notes above, and may behave differently if they lose too much of it. Retune experience and GP drops to be more fitting with the enemies that drop them. Most notably, bosses now award experience, thank you, and consequently a good deal of Esper points to boot. Made a small improvement to the option to disable experience gains from battle. Changed how fallen allies are replaced between tiers in the final battle. Added a unequipped NPC to the scenario select screen. Yep, the imp. Shadow is now cheaper to hire in Collagen. 3,000 gil to 1,000. Made quality of life changes to the several dungeons. Funpaba's second attack on Mulbits now occurs immediately after the first if it occurs after you receive the Falcon. The chest at Ebbets Rock no longer requires to be fed in one sitting. The dialogue trigger to refight Hidden is no longer a 1/8 branch. The Merchant. Added a Merchant goes to the final segment of Science Nightmare. The basement level of the Ancient Castle is no longer hidden. Added several new save points and areas just before major boss fights. Characters in Magitech armor now attack with Tech Laser instead of Elemental Beams. Heal Force now revives dead allies in addition to restoring HP to live ones. Battles in the Narsh Mines. World of Balance now maintain the areas BGM, I appreciate that. Searching for Friends now only plays when you're aboard the Falcon. I like that song though. Shorten the unnecessary lengthy arrow Mutsuno Kami animation. Thank you. Poon Baba no longer sometimes removes only one character from your party. North Cross now only freezes a maximum of 2 characters. Mind Blast respects stamina but gets an extra attack to compensate. Life Shaver now respects the float status and is no longer reflectable. Glare and Blowfish are now physical attacks, thus respect the clear status. The clear status is no longer removed if the target absorbs a spell with Runic or by ground-based attacks missing floating targets. Clear status is now properly lifted by spells cast from rods used in battle. The Morph and Imp status no longer affect non-fractional healing items. Items are no longer consumed in battle if the user dies. We've gone over that. Brushes and healing items now properly retarget. We've gone over that. X-Fight now retargets if the first attack kills the original target. Went over that. Jump no longer disables most special weapons effects, most notably Anima Weapon and Dual Wield setups now attack only the primary weapon. Fix several issues with Pallador's behavior, making it much easier to use. Characters no longer disappear when Palladors miss them. Palladors can no longer be targeted while airborne. Characters now land in quick succession rather than... We've gone over that. Interceptor and Golem now only use the correct animation when activated, which corrects the lowered odds of late-game interceptor counters and Golem's artificially enhanced durability. Due to this fix, Golem's defense has been reverted to the vanilla value of 192. Terra can no longer morph while imped, and is now immune to imped once morphed. This is because Terra's Esper sprite overrides the imp sprite, making the status invisible. Gogo no longer does 50% more damage than intended with physical Bushidos when dual wielding. Interesting. Setzer's dice no longer receives a damage boost from Berserk status. Flare from Apocalypse now correctly receives the Morph damage boost. Exo no longer revives heals undead enemies when it's cast by the Doomstick. Multi-target attacks which respect stamina now correctly check each target individually. Enemy special attacks that inflict sleep no longer miss on targets with death immunity. Nice. Abilities with one ally targeting are no longer able to randomly target via rage or enemy AI teammates on the opposite end of the field during side or pincer attacks. Inherent status is now initialized property on characters who are dead at the beginning of the battle and on enemies who are not present. Updated assassins optimized fix hacks, leave slots with no valid equipment empty. Fix several RNG errors, most notably a random encounter spike during the vector escape. Nice. And I appreciate that because I was stuck at that spot. Fix other minor bugs and dialogue issues. EP gains are no longer erroneously displayed before Espers are attained. Gao no longer occasionally refuses to step back into position after attacking. I don't know because I've experienced that. Ragnarok now appears in the last Esper list instead of second to last. The Tridach spell is no longer missing part of his tail when summoned. Drain spell now has the correct precasting animation. Seraph now has grants immunity to the condemned status. Grab Bomb no longer clears Berserk Muddle. Discord and Blowfish no longer reflectable. Shrapnel no longer considers stamina in addition to evasion. Diffuser no longer incorrectly flagged as part of Earth Element. Power Glove now has the correct value, was 5,000. Rare items should be all valued at 1. Excalibur now allows an offhand weapon, which is dumb. Whatever tickles your... The cover ability now correctly disabled by the dance status. Backside attacks are no longer disabled at Mount Zozo or in Gogo's Cave. Random encounters are now disabled in the room with Ifrit and Shiva. Thank you. I appreciate that. It's no longer possible to run from Ifrit, Shiva, or Chardanook battles. It is the rare sketch for Doomgage is now Arrow instead of Aqualung. Master T is now vulnerable to poison. Gao can now leap on the ×3 magic pot formation. Leap is no longer usable in the final battle. Terra's Morph state now transitions properly between the phases of the final battle. Fixed a paragraph in the race tutorial that scrolled too far without pausing for input. I think I experienced that. Shadow's name no longer appears as Scrapper in the Coliseum. Align the message upon entering Kefka's Tower to the top of the screen for better readability. Thank you. Gave a text box to the message that repeats the unlock me password for the same reason. The version text in the config menu is now yellow instead of white. Colons and semicolons now properly vertically aligned. Added a translation, Spanish, and an optional vanilla dialogue patch, which, if BTB is telling me correctly, is the one I'm using. Added a new game plus patch to the Unlock Me. Awesome. Added new alternative sprite patches to Unlock Me. That's how I was able to rock the Terra and Celeste pants sprites. Also touched up the base sprite for one of the above alternates. Added screenshots to Unlock Me image gallery. All screenshots are now in PNG format with substantially smaller file sizes. Added higher resolution sprites and the SNES Mini Switch art to the Unlock Me image gallery. Updated the main Brave New World logo in the Unlock Me image gallery to the modern design, which I will add to the next stream. I just have the regular old Final Fantasy VI PNG. Added a damage calculator and bestiary to the BNWCP. Special thanks to Cecil and Mishrak. Redesigned the print me, now distributed as a PDF file. The first version is in the Unlock Me. Rebundled LSP, ROM patching utility, and Brave New World download. Okay. Lots of thank yous here. Lots of people, lots of people. So many names that I could mispronounce. So many. Feel free to contact us with your questions, feedback, comments, concerns, observations, complaints, insults, ridicule, screeds, japes, threats, death threats, and marriage proposals. Read all of it now. Boy, I am already 13 minutes behind. How would you like your own Brave New World or an actual blah, blah, blah? Hey, look at that. Okay, here's some advertising. Let's go. Let's go. Looking for the guys responsible for this mess. BTB at abusemynipples.biz. Okay. Start over. Jesus. Yeah, let's go. Let's go from the top. All right, psych. Please feel free to contact us. Yep. Or better yet, visit our discussion forums or join our Discord, which I have. Is liking things on Facebook your bag, baby? If so, visit us at facebook.com Final Fantasy VI Brave New World. And in fact, I will do it on cam right now. I'm on my iPad. I'm on my Facebook. I'm going to type in FF6 Brave New World. I'm looking for you guys. Is it a group? Autofire players group. Final Fantasy 14 players age 30 plus. Facebook.com, FF6, Brave New World. That's what I have. I can't find it. I cannot find it. See all groups for Final Fantasy Brave New World. I don't see it. All right, let me just do it with the full name now. Final Fantasy VI Brave New World. Groups. Sector 6, Final Fantasy Fight Club, Final Fantasy Community. Alright, I don't see it. Hey, but Alia Cohen has sent me a friend request. A obvious bot. Looks like a doll, actually. Please join here, because I created a WhatsApp group which contains sexy and beautiful women. Like in my profile. It's literally a doll. And you can get in touch directly with the woman you choose. I'm waiting for you in the group. Free without spending money. Okay. Yeah, I don't think so. I'll pass on that. I'm afraid that's all we know, gentlemen. Alright, so look. After reading this, all of this, I now have come to appreciate this game more than I have before. And that's saying something. I guess this is the reason why people do it. Because, I mean, if I had any hand in doing any of this stuff, I would be proud of it too. So, bravo to everyone involved. And I ain't done. I ain't done putting you guys over, because as soon as I clear this game proper, I'm going to put together a video essay review for you guys. I'm going to pour over the internet. I'm going to look at every site that I can, see what everybody else is saying. Write out a script, put my own thoughts and feelings towards this, and then put it out to the world so that hopefully more people will get involved and see this, because more people need to see this. And it's a shame that more people haven't. But I'm going to make it my duty to make sure that more people see this. So with that being said, I need to jump on my Mac, and I need to start working on something real quick. Something just came down the pipe. It's time sensitive. I need to take care of it, and if anything, I am known to, for my timely schedule. So, with all that being said, I appreciate you guys hanging out and being a part of all this, and we'll see you next time.